Hey, and good evening. Welcome to the Sunday show after dark. Seth Andrews here with Eve from Eve Was Framed, who
Hi,
I think is
everybody.
broadcasting online. Are you producing content almost every day these days? I know I'm always seeing new clips from you.
I can't keep my mouth shut.
No, I know what that's like. I think people who have an activist nature about them, like we can't help ourselves. You
Yeah.
feel that?
Oh, for sure. I get comments all the time that are like, "Why do you try so hard and put so much effort into this?" I'm like, "You don't understand. I'm having to space out because it takes me 5 seconds to like make something and say it, and I'm constantly thinking it and wanting to say things. So,
We
really
will
takes
sit,
no
Natalie
effort
and
at
I
all."
we'll sit, we'll be on the edge. I don't know. We'll sit on the couch and there'll be something that happens on the news. And she's more like, whatever, right? She doesn't get
Sure.
riled up. And me, somebody says something or something stupid happens or a politician is just being slimy or there's a religious message or claim or charlatan or televangelist or faith healer, whatever. I mean, Natalie would call him a trigger, a hot button.
Uh-huh.
And I'm
Uh-huh.
literally on the edge of the couch and the veins popping out. And I'm like, that is the stupidest thing. Here's why it's wrong. And here's why somebody needs to make a video about it. And she just looks
Yep.
at me like I'm some sad, broken thing, and then we have a good laugh. I think that's a common thing with activists. Anyway, thanks everybody
Yeah,
for
I think
for
so.
being here tonight. It's an honor for
Yeah.
me to be able to finally hang out with you, Eve. I've been working on a chance to maybe have you on my own channel at some point to talk about your story because you came out of the faith, right? You came out of
I
a
did. Yeah.
pretty high
Yep.
control deal, right?
For sure. I grew up very evangelical. My family still has a pretty popular ministry that they all run together and uh all kinds of craziness. And The Thinking Atheist was the first atheist content that I really started consuming and listening to because it's funny, we were saying somebody called you the Mr. Rogers of atheism, but I think that's what helped me. I was like, wait a second, this guy doesn't sound scary or angry or he's making a lot of sense and also
Wow.
being kind and compassionate. Atheists are not supposed to be like that. So your content and then of course atheist experience and with when Matt was on there, I was like binging all of that so much, and that helped me just kind of feel like, wait a second, this makes sense because I already didn't believe. I had stopped believing. But then hearing someone like you and then hearing someone like Matt, two very different people, but saying things that made equal amounts of sense. And I don't know, it just that changed everything for me. So it's so cool to be here now hosting a show together. That's
That's
crazy.
cool.
Like
That's cool. Well,
5
you're
years
very
ago,
kind.
I would have been freaking out.
I think the dream of anybody is to matter, or maybe let me reverse that stream and say I think one of the things that scares me the most is not mattering. Right? What if it doesn't matter?
Mm,
What if you
yeah.
produce the shows and they go out in the ether? What if the work didn't make a ripple in the world? And so when I hear something like that, I'm just blown away. And I'm kind of a gateway atheist. Like
Mm.
people Google my channel appears and then they can go
That's a good way
deeper.
to
And
put it.
because we still talk a lot about I mean, Eve, you can only debunk the book of Genesis so many times. Oh, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yep.
But there's somebody who dialed in or who Googled or found the channel who this might be the first time they are
Mhm.
having that conversation. I don't mean to make you tell your deconversion story all over again, but I'm fascinated. What flavor of the
Yeah.
faith was it? Were you Pentecostal or what?
It had little bits of that. I don't know if you're familiar with like Hillsong and
Oh,
Bethel
yeah.
Church and all of that. I went to the Supernatural School of Ministry, which is as bizarre as it sounds. So we definitely believed in faith healing and it was very charismatic. I would say charismatic, non-denominational. Um, and believed in the prophetic and all of that. We were overseas all the time. So really like this weird extreme place that also we were like cool because we dressed normal, like we were super conservative in so many ways, but then we were like radical in all the other ways, the Jesus freak movement. Um, that's the roots that I came from. So very
Kind of an
different than where I'm at
experiential
now.
culture, though, right? It was very much
Yes.
like when we were in that sort of specific. I mean, there was Bible teaching, but it really was more about I have a relationship with Jesus. I love
Yeah.
Jesus, right? That kind of thing, where you weren't there for theology as much as you were for a sense of belonging and purpose, and to get a rush. We got
Mhm.
high on Jesus, as they say.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was a worship leader, so I was also, you know, conjuring up those moments for other people, and that's kind of when I started seeing behind the curtain a lot more, and thinking, "Wait a second, why does Jesus need my help so much to create an emotional moment? How come these key changes are seeming to be what's triggering, the Holy Spirit?" Um, that was the beginning of the end for me, was that whole world, so I'm
Yeah,
very passionate now about exposing it all.
I can see you on stage with your arm, with your hand up. Oh, I can see.
Outstretched.
Oh, I can see you're
I
singing
was doing
Majesty. Oh, you're singing
it.
Third Day. Yeah, you're
Oh,
singing all
yeah.
those praise and worship.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
funny. I did. Oh crap, her name doesn't is not appearing on my radar on the top of my head. We did a show.
Hmm.
I think her first name is Grace. It'll come to me probably 5 minutes after we're done talking today. But she did an expose of the Christian music industry, how much of
Oh.
an industry it really is, right? It's a
Oh,
big
yeah.
business. And I was there when lightning struck. So I was in FM Christian
That's
radio
right.
from 1990 to 2002. And it used to be, everything back in the 90s, 80s and 90s was done for about a buck and a half in somebody's basement. And then
Mhm.
in the 90s, we saw this it was after the satanic panic, but parents were starting to worry about the content of all that secular music. And so Christian music became a family safe alternative. And the format exploded. And so all these major record labels like Word and Sony and Columbia, whatnot, they came in
Yeah.
and they bought up all these boutique Christian labels. And it
Mm.
became the fastest growing genre of music in
Yeah.
the entire 1990s. It just became huge business, and it remains so today. And what
Yep.
Grace Baldridge was
That's
talking
right.
about was how they license these worship songs so that every time they get played, they see them on the big screen and there's the lines and the little bouncing ball and everybody's singing along. That's a billion-dollar industry now
Yeah.
where
Yep.
people are cashing in. I'm not
Oh,
saying
yeah.
everybody who does worship music or wrote a worship song or published one is a
Right.
scammer, but I am saying there's an
It's a
awful lot
business.
of money, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's an
Yeah.
awful lot of money.
Well,
So,
and I get told all the time, which I'm sure you hear this, like, "Oh, you've quit religion because you just wanna make a bunch of money manipulating people." And I was like, "Wait a second. If I
yeah.
wanted to make a bunch of money manipulating people, I would have taken the record deal offer that I got from, a major worship label. That's where I would have been making the money. My peers now that are still in it have $1,000,000 homes. So I think people don't realize that it's very much a business. There's no difference between that and the quote secular music industry, other than they're, in my opinion, sheep in wolf's clothing or wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
So
I'm tracking. Yeah.
it's wild. Well,
Um,
I see we've got some callers coming in. Also, reminder to everybody else, if you're a theist, we will prioritize your call. It's 720-619-2288. Are you down to take our first caller?
I'll follow your lead. I'm ready.
Okay. Let's talk to John. Um, hey John, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing tonight?
Doing fine.
What did you want to talk to us about tonight?
Well, I'm a former atheist. I was an atheist. I'm 43 now. I was an atheist till I was 35, and I went through spiritual warfare. I had a intense spiritual warfare that happened to me, and I wound up coming to God that way. I never really knew anything about apologetics. You know, I just, my main problem, my problem for me not believing, I never really kind of studied the creationist, naturalist, or all this stuff until after I became a Christian, and then, but what I want to, that's just a little bit of my background. But I study, I'm a Christian apologist. I'm learning how to defend what I believe. And I believe that people should have good reasons for what they believe. And I believe that most believers don't have good reasons for what they believe. People of all faiths.
So,
And I
yeah.
believe
So
that,
what's your good
go
reason?
ahead.
That's what I'd be most interested to hear. What's your good reason to believe? It's the Christian
Well,
God, correct? Is that who you believe in?
right, right.
Okay.
My case, what I'm talking about is mainly just theism in general, because like Christianity, that's a whole nother, you know what I'm saying? I just want to start with the foundation of like naturalism versus creationism.
Well,
So like, see, like the way
I'm most interested. What's your good reason for believing in the existence of a God? Because I
okay,
like that you
well,
started with saying we need a good reason. I totally agree. And so I assume that means
right,
you have a good reason to believe. So I want to know, what's your good reason to believe in the existence of a
well,
God?
I just want to start with, I think it comes down to your presuppositions and like your worldview. The way that I look at it, like people's all about science. Everything's about science, and the scientific method. And I agree that the scientific, is very helpful for discovering truth. But I think that naturalists, I think it's a philosophical belief, and I think how people like scoff
But
and,
so,
and
John,
say
just
like
real
this
quick, just because I really
right,
want to keep this call on track. So instead of talking about
yeah.
other people and what they believe and why you maybe don't think those are good reasons to believe what they believe or don't believe, what is your reason for why you believe? Or are you trying to
Well,
communicate that you just believe in a God because you don't think anything else has a good enough
no,
answer?
when I look at the universe and I try to make sense of what caused the universe, you got a naturalistic approach, which is fine, but I think you also should have the possibility of a God or intelligent design alongside there with it when you at the very beginning. And I think what the problem is most naturalists, they exclude the possibility of God and scoff and say it's unscientific. And so when we present evidence for God, which I'll give you evidence, but I just want to lay this foundation first. When we present evidence, they say there's no evidence for God, but I feel like they've already ruled out the possibility of God from the very beginning. So
Right,
I
but
just want to
John,
ask y'all,
so yeah,
right?
I'm way more interested in you and why you went from being an atheist for 35 years to now you've been a Christian, a theist. So what is it? What is the good reason that you have for why you are a theist?
Well, I would say that there's the intelligent design. I mean, like the fine tuning of the universe. Um, how there's so many constants that y'all familiar with these arguments that there's so many constants of nature that if you was to increase or decrease them just by a tiny amount, like the universe couldn't exist, molecules couldn't form, life couldn't exist. It's not just one thing. I can't just say one thing. It's a combination of a lot of different things. But one of my main things is the fine tuning. And I see if the universe is a completely random, unguided process with no intelligence behind it, why couldn't the laws of nature? Why couldn't the constants have like the four forces: gravity, electromagnetism, strong, weak nuclear force? Why couldn't they? If it's random, why couldn't they have been a little stronger or a little weaker?
So the fine tuning argument, Seth. Sorry, do you want to say something? I keep
No,
taking up all the
I'm
time.
just whenever. No, just you're fine. Well, I'm familiar with the fine tuning argument. I have a series of questions. Um, First of all, you said that you are studying more now that you are a Christian to defend the faith, which I find a little bit
Right,
interesting because I think
right,
now you are trying not to be right, but to be proven right. Right. So I'm a Christian. Now I'm going to learn how to defend Christianity. And I think we might want to reverse that and say, well, let's try to discover what is true. And then if Christianity is true, then I will accept it as truth or fact or whatever. I think that's a more healthy approach. I think learning to defend it after you believe it is a bit problematic. We talked a little bit, I heard the word worldview. Well, atheists don't have a worldview. Like atheism is simply a non-belief in deities. It's not, you can be almost anything and be an atheist. We see trends and tendencies? Well, yeah, certainly. I think we do when we're tethered more to the natural world and away from supernatural ideas. But I want to come back finally to the intelligent design or fine tuning argument. I'm actually doing a speech all around the world. I just gave it in Canada based on Dr. Abby Haper's book, The Not So Intelligent Designer, because it's almost a romantic notion when we look at the beauty, the birth of a baby, a child. We see something serendipitous in the world that seems just to be made that way. And that's wonderful. And I think in some ways it's understandable why we lean toward those things. But we live on an earth that's constantly trying to kill us. Right? Our planet has a boiling center. Volcanic eruptions kill 10,000 people in a single day. Tsunamis kill 250,000 people in a single day. We've got genetic defects that are passed down through generations. Our sun gives us cancer. We have useless hair on our arms and legs. This does nothing. We have degenerating eyesight. We have eyes that are susceptible to allergies and can go blind. We have organs that can explode inside of us and we die by infection. Hashtag the appendix. We have knees that wear out at midlife. We have teeth that are constantly filled with bacteria and chipping because we only have one set of adult teeth for 70 some years. I mean, one example after the other. And I think to myself, we can't look at the birth of a beautiful child without acknowledging that we live on a planet supposedly designed for us where our primary source of light emits UV rays that can kill us. That's a bit of a problem for me. So I'm not sure I buy into the intelligent design position here. I don't know. What are your thoughts on all that, my friend?
Well, I think it all boils down to, I'm sure y'all familiar with Christian theology, and I would argue that God did not design the world like this, that the world, just like it says in Genesis, that he made everything good. I think that God is a holy God, and I think that we are sinful, and I think that we do evil, and I think we rebel against God, and I think, like the Bible says, the wages of sin is death.
Okay,
and
hang
I think
on.
that God
I don't want
loves
to trample
all of
on
us.
Eve here. I don't want to trample on Eve, but I've got to jump in real fast, okay?
Please.
Do you believe that God knows all things, past, present, and future? Do you believe Yahweh is truly omniscient?
Sure.
Okay, so God would have foreseen the immediate failure of his master plan in the garden before the creation of the universe. He would have known, if I make this man and this woman and I create them imperfectly, they will then act imperfectly, and then it's all going to go wrong. And then we've got, genocide, tribal wars, disease, the earth turning against us, hell, all of these other things that are in store for the generations that come after. God, who knows everything, saw that coming, and he proceeded with the plan anyway. Why would that God, a good God, proceed with a plan that he foreknew would fall apart almost from the very beginning?
Well, I think that he wanted to create a creation, and the whole motivation behind it was love. And you cannot have true love without having creatures with a free will. He didn't want to create robots. And so just because people still have a free will. People still have choices to make. And
all right, well, why? But why? I mean, if I can distill it down, why would God create any creature that he foreknew would end up in hell? Why would he do that?
I mean, for one thing, I can't just sit here and say why. I can give you my reasons why, but ultimately, I don't know. No one knows all of God's reasons that he does everything. I don't claim to know the mind of God, but I know it makes sense to me. Like, for me personally, I've lived a very sinful life and done a lot of bad things in my life, but God became flesh, and he came and suffered an agonizing death for me. And as a believer, I believe that I have salvation, but because of his sacrifice for my sins. And I think that's a pretty awesome.
I've heard the Roman road, man. I've heard the salvation message. What I'm trying to get to, Eve, please forgive me, and I'm going to shut up in just a second.
No, I
want to follow this to its destination. Okay.
Please.
We are looking at a perfect designer who created a plan that immediately went south. The plan immediately broke, right? And then we've got nothing but just pain and horror and death. God continues to attempt to try solutions throughout the Old Testament, whether it's tribal wars or the drowning of the world or whatever. And then finally, he decides that the only way to forgive people, even though he's omnipotent and he could just manifest forgiveness and redemption, no, he needs to have himself impregnated into an unwed teenager via ghost sex so the offspring can be turned into a bloody meat pinata 2,000 years before we're having this conversation right now to rescue us from the hell, the torture chamber of fire that God himself created. Do you see any scenario where a parent would have an imperfect, even disobedient and rebellious child and say, the moral thing is to douse that child in kerosene and set the child on fire? Can you find any scenario where that would be moral with a human being?
Well, for one thing, I personally believe in an eternal hell, but there's a lot of believers that would argue that hell is not eternal, and they use scripture.
So what? I'm interested in you, brother. I'm interested in you. Depart from me, you who are cursed, into a lake of everlasting fire and damnation. You've got a great reason, if you believe the Bible, to believe in hell. So, is it moral to set your child on fire for being disobedient in any context?
I think the way that you're phrasing it, you're kind of like straw manning it a little bit. You're kind of just the way you're saying it, there's a lot more context to it than that. You can't compare a holy God to a parent, for one thing. Not only is he our God, but he is also a judge.
So, John, I'm really interested in you actually answering his question, though. I'm interested in you answering his question just about a human. Is it moral ever for a human parent to set their child on fire for being disobedient?
Either way you're saying it, setting it on fire, that's not what God is doing.
We're not talking about a God right now. For a human parent to do that, is it ever moral?
But I'm not. I don't agree with that analogy.
Why can't you just? It's not an analogy. I'm asking what Seth asked you. Is it okay for a parent to ever do that? This is not an analogy. This is an actual situation. Is it ever moral for a parent to do that?
Kid and light them on fire
for disobeying?
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay, cool. So would it ever be moral for a God to do that?
So God douses us, and so when people go to hell, God pours kerosene on them and lights them on fire with a lighter?
Who knows?
Well, they're on fire.
Would it be moral for him to cause them any kind of pain for disobedience?
For God to do any kind of pain? Like I said, I think the wages of sin is death, and I think that
why? Who decided that?
God does.
Why?
Why does he decide it?
Why is that what he decided? That the wages of sin is death. He gets to make the rules. Why did he make those rules?
Hey, look, I'm not a God. I don't know the mind of God. I'm just saying it makes sense to me that there's evil in the world, and that everybody sins somewhat. People have free will not to sin. And God is a holy God, and there's punishment for doing evil. And he said that death is the punishment. He gave us life. He is the one that created us and gave us life. And I think he has the right to set the rules of the universe. And I think he has the right to take in someone's life, just like he's the one that gave them life.
John, what you're describing is the worst villain I can possibly think of in a Marvel movie. If we were watching this on a movie, we would all agree that somebody.
But you're not holy.
We would agree that. Why is God holy? Who decided that? Who said that God is holy first?
Who said God is holy? Well, I believe the Bible's true, and I believe there's.
Who got to set the standard for what holiness is?
I mean, I believe God is the standard of holiness.
So God got to set the standard, and then he gets to say that he fits it, and then we all have to just bow down to that because he got here first?
Yes, exactly. Because he's God. That's right. He made the universe, and he owns everything in it.
Right.
If God created the universe and gave all of us life, does he not have the right to end our lives if we do things against his law? Does he not have that right?
The right given by who? Who gives him the right to do that?
Well, obviously, he's the only eternal being, and he created everything. So obviously, he's the boss.
Do you see how you're describing a villain here? So
How is
you're
he a villain?
describing, because you're describing
Villains don't
I'm going to answer
villains don't die for people who do evil and
John, I'm going
disobey
to answer your
them.
question. John, I'm going to answer your question. So you're
Okay.
describing a character. You're describing a character that's sitting around. First of all, who knows how he got there, but he's there. He's sitting around and he thinks, I want to create something. He's all knowing, so he can see everything that's going to happen if he creates this universe. And he sees the babies that are going to be abused and die horrific deaths. He sees the famine that's going to wipe out entire families. He sees the genocide that's going to occur. He sees horrific natural disasters that are going to cause people to suffer, animals to suffer. He sees all of this. And he says, you know what? I want to make this anyways. Oh, and he sees the millions and millions of people that are supposedly going to face an eternity of negative consequences if they don't choose him. And he knows ahead of time that that's all going to happen. And he says, I'm going to create this anyways. Do you not see a problem?
When y'all have children, I don't know if y'all have kids or not, but when people have kids, they know that their kids are gonna one day die, and that they're
John, I can tell you, dying is not the same
in their life.
John, if
so why do they have kids when they know their kids gonna suffer?
So if I knew 100% without a doubt that a child I was going to conceive was going to face inhumane abuse, violence, disease, anything like that, I would absolutely make sure that I never conceived that child. If I had,
we all suffer. Everybody suffers.
Hey, John, please don't interrupt me. If I had the power if I had the power to be able to see all of that play out, it would be unethical and wrong of me to have that child, because I would be knowingly choosing to torture another human.
But you don't know that people get old and die and suffer? That happens to everybody.
Yeah, but I think what, if I may, a parent is committed to nurturing and protecting and meeting needs. I mean, I think of all the parents in my life that I know, no matter how rebellious or off the rails a child might go, let's just say they have gone off the chain, they've really left the path and they're doing terrible things. There's no scenario where the parent says, you know what, my child deserves to be horribly tortured for who they are and what they do. They might grieve that they've made bad choices and there are consequences the person they have become, but torture by parent is the issue I think that Eve is trying to pursue here. And so I think, why would you create a being that you foreknew was going to go off the rails and hit the wall and destroy their lives? And if you had created the hell that you were going to place them in firsthand as a parent, and the Bible says God is a parent. The Bible calls him Father. We are the children. We are God's children. So the analogy, the parent-child analogy totally fits. Why would it be moral? You know, the whole God made the anthill so he gets to take the magnifying glass and fry the ants because we're all ants in his anthill. That argument doesn't really fly with me, because we're talking about
that's
torture.
A terrible art. That's a terrible way to say that, because that's not true. That's not what God does.
No, you said it's God's universe and he can do what he wants with us. He made us, so he can do what he wants.
But he's not. But he's not arbitrary. He has good reasons for what he does. He don't just wake up one day and decide he's going to kill everybody.
There is a good reason to see me writhing and screaming and gritting my teeth and crying out for water and relief and over and over for minutes, seconds, hours, days, months, years, eternity. There is reason for me to experience unspeakable horror. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, like I said, for one thing, I think the Bible uses it uses certain language that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's exactly like what the idea that you got. I mean, the way that I look, I'm not saying people's not in agony in hell. I'm not saying that, But people being just on fire and screaming and stuff like that, I don't think that that's quite accurate either. I would look at hell as eternal separation from God. I think God created us, and He created us to be everlasting, for our spirit to live on forever. And I think that you got two choices. You can either spend eternity with God, or you can spend eternity separated from God. And I think our life here is like a test. You choose what you want to do. Do you want to follow God, or do you want to go your own way, or what?
So John,
whatever choices you make in life. I think hell essentially is just eternal separation from God. And if you think He's a moral monster,
hang on. Look, I appreciate you, but even I have heard this sermon 500 times. Like, are you getting flashes, Eve, whenever he's doing that? I feel like I'm literally at youth camp hearing the apologetic. I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Every single topic y'all talk about on here, everybody's heard a million times.
But John,
creationist and naturalist.
So John, here's the issue. We asked you for your good reasons to believe that a God exists, and now we're just being preached to for a while, and we all went off track, and it's a fun conversation.
No,
but
I'm
in the middle of talking. Back to getting on track. We asked, what are your good reasons for believing? And we heard a very vague, weak, fine-tuning argument. But I'm still not hearing actual good reasons for believing in your God. And what I am hearing a lot of is you trying to find ways to rehear and to rephrase the Bible in ways that make it easier for you to palate. And it's interesting to me that you're having to soften some of these theologies because you don't even like how they sound. I know a lot of Christians that would say, oh no, you're going to burn in hell and it's going to be torture and agony and terrible and gnashing of the teeth. And you're saying, well, I just think it's separation. You're like doing the hell light version. And I'm not so interested in the preaching. I'm more interested in the actual reason behind believing in this God that you've now chosen to make a lot of excuses for.
Okay, so what I did, I started off with the fine-tuning argument, and then Seth got all emotional and got angry at God and started asking me all these other questions about hell. He turned the conversation toward God being uncruel and hell being unjust. I was
That's
giving
not being emotional.
Well, you can tell by his tone of his voice he's emotional.
The tone of Seth Andrews' voice sounded emotional to you.
When people start talking about
all the hosts on here,
when people start talking about God being like taking a magnifying glass and burning, sending people
John,
in hell and burning them. Yeah, they're very passionate about it. They're angry at God.
John, let's pretend that Seth and I are both furious at God. We're secretly not atheists. We're secretly theists, and we're angry at God. Cool. Okay. What is your good reason for believing that a God exists? There's people watching and listening. So give the good reasons.
Right.
We'll sit here just being angry.
Okay. So like let me start off from where I was left off about why couldn't, if all the constants in nature were random, why couldn't they be increased or a little stronger or a little weaker, like the four forces of nature? Because if any of them was just a tiny, tiny bit stronger or weaker, the universe couldn't exist, or molecules couldn't form. And also these other constants that even physicists, even atheists and agnostics, physicists, okay. I tell you what. Let me just go on to my next favorite argument is DNA.
No, well, I think you've taken up quite a bit of bandwidth here, my friend.
Yeah, we might need to call back with
other because you steered a conversation about God being unjust and people to hell when I was giving you evidence.
Because we started talking about. Go ahead, Seth.
No, forgive me. There's a little bit of a delay. Eve, go ahead.
Well, we started talking about fine tuning, and then Seth pointed out why it's not finely tuned, and your excuse then was, oh, well, sin. So you're just weaving around everything, and I'm afraid that that's what's going to happen when we get to whatever your next favorite argument is, because like Seth said, clearly you didn't research all of this and then become a Christian. You had an experience. You had what I would probably consider to be an emotional experience, speaking of being emotional, and then that caused you to start believing something, and now after, in hindsight, you're having to form arguments around this dogmatic belief in order to support the position that you found yourself in, which is a position of belief. And that's fine. But if we're just going to keep weaving around everything we say, unfortunately, this call has already gone to 26 minutes and we have multiple other callers. I am highly interested in hearing your other arguments. I host this Tuesday night. I'm about to get to those announcements, actually. And I would love for you to call then. We don't have enough theist callers on Chewed Gum. So you're totally invited to call back. But that's where I'm going to kind of leave it at that, unless Seth wants to talk further on this phone call. I do think it's time to move on to the next one.
I'm good.
Can I ask y'all just one question real quick, please?
You can ask it, and we may or may not answer depending on time.
Okay. Do you think that we should only allow natural causes for the cause of the universe, or should we allow the possibility of a supernatural?
It wouldn't be supernatural if that's what happened. Then it would be like the most natural thing. So
I'm saying when we're trying to discover the cause of the universe, should we only look for natural causes and only natural causes?
By definition, it would be a natural cause.
Right. So you rule out the possibility of God from the very beginning.
No, you're not hearing what I'm saying. But I do think this is a topic. This is a great place for you to start the call on Tuesday night if you want to call back. Seth,
okay,
do you want to answer that?
I'm very emotional, Eve. I'm very emotional. And I just want to sin, apparently.
Oh my gosh.
I
can't. It's not letting me end the call for some reason.
I am reminded of
there we go.
I know the notion of slaves celebrating their chains. And I think we are, God can do whatever he wants with us. We don't have the right. We don't have the right, or I guess right is the word. We don't deserve goodness. So everything good that comes from God is just a plus, because we're wretches, right? It's like the old song, Amazing Grace, right? God came to save a wretch like me. The Bible says there was no one worthy, no, not one. People talk about how, even babies are born sinners. And I think this is a celebration of chains. And I don't know about you, but it took me a long time to get over the fear of hell. Did you go through that?
Yeah.
Did I think the Hillsong culture did have a literal hell, didn't it?
Yeah. So I actually got over my fear of hell before I left. I think that's what gave me the strength to start. Sorry, there's like something
no
driving
worries.
by.
Yeah.
I think that's what gave me the courage actually to question the existence of a God altogether. Is hell already wasn't making sense to me, because I really believed in an all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God, and I could not reconcile that God and hell. So I was like, well, hell doesn't make sense then. And it didn't seem to be entirely biblical from what I was learning. And so I think that's what helped me get over it. However, that what if definitely hung around, because when you're taught since you're 3 years old to be afraid of hell and you stay up every night terrified of that, and demons, that I was so scared of demons. I think that's what really, like, that fear just stays in your body even when you're mentally over it. It just kind of lives there. It's not that's why I consider it so horrific to teach children about hell, because you're wiring their brain to just experience chronic fear.
Well, I hope I didn't hijack you when he was starting to go off.
No, I was
It just
so glad.
sounded like so many sermons that I've heard. And in fact, I pulled up just a rapid fire laundry list, because when I say that we've heard these things so many times, I wasn't trying to stop the conversation by saying, oh, this is old news. I was saying what you said, actually much better than I did, was you're giving us sermons, not answers to the questions that we had presented. Right. But I'm sure you've heard some of these. My granddaddy wasn't a monkey. Evolution is just a theory. The God of the gaps. It takes more faith to be an atheist. Teach the controversy. You were never a true Christian. You took it out of context. I had a personal experience. Better safe than sorry, which is Pascal's wager. How did something come from nothing? The I is too complex to have evolved. Scientist X believes in God. It's true because the Bible said so. How can you disrespect God? We're a Christian nation. They discovered Noah's Ark. There are no atheists in foxholes. If it's not true, why has it been around for thousands of years? Ignore the Old Testament, read the New Testament. Hitler was an atheist. You just want to be God. It's not a religion, it's a relationship and after death experiences. Did I miss any good ones in there off the
That's
top of
so
your head?
bravo. And I honestly, I think as far as like a bingo game goes, that guy should win a prize for the amount of
Yeah.
those that he hit.
Well, again, I'm
Which
sorry for getting
I,
emotional on you. If you forgive me, I just
right,
need a
yeah,
moment to compose myself.
you were really scaring me with how emotional and angry you
Okay,
seemed.
okay, I'm gonna be
Um,
all right. Continue.
Yeah, it was wild. And honestly, nothing personal against John. I genuinely, if he's listening, I hope that he'll call back on Tuesday. I appreciate that he was answering stuff and staying respectful and all of that. So that's great. It just always is disheartening to me when I'm talking to somebody that so clearly is better than the religion they're believing, to the point that they're having to weave it around and be like, well, I don't think there's actual fire. I don't think he wouldn't do that. Like, and just giving God this character, God, the benefit of the doubt over and over and over again because of something maybe emotional or traumatic or whatever it may be that led them to this point of belief, because clearly the good reason didn't come first, just like you pointed out, or else that would have been the first thing he had to offer us, would be a good reason, not talking about, well, atheists believe this, that, and the other,
Yeah.
anyways. Hopefully we get more calls from that. I'll give our announcements real quick and then we can take our next caller. Monday we have Skeptalk with Shannon Q and Paul Enns. Tuesday I am finally reunited with Alyssa on Chewed Gum. I have missed you guys so much over there. If you guys haven't hung out with Alyssa and I on a Tuesday night, we have a lot of fun, and she and I haven't hung out or talked in weeks and weeks, so I'm sure it's going to be very exciting us catching up. Wednesday, the hang up with Matt Dillahunty and Will Judy. And then Thursday, it is TACIS with Arden and Luxander. And we don't know yet about next Sunday, but it'll be exciting when we find out. So are you ready to take another call?
When you are, you bet.
Cool. Let's go with Ryan. Hey, Ryan, how are you?
Good. How are you all?
Good.
Doing well. What's your question for us tonight, or what did you want to talk about?
Well, I guess I wanted to give my argument for the existence of the God. And first, I'd like to say thanks for having me on the show. I've watched it a few times, and it's kind of helped me weave through dealing with different issues. And I kind of grew up Southern Baptist, so I kind of more so leaving the faith, but I still lean towards theism because I have
Okay.
an argument that I strongly believe in, and I kind of want to discuss it with you all and get your opinion on it and see what you all think of it.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. So essentially, I accept principle of sufficient reason, that every contingent fact has an explanation. So contingent facts are facts that can't explain themselves and require an explanation. And from my understanding, this kind of maps our reality and what we deal with on a daily basis. So it's a sort of pragmatic approach to explaining what I observe. And because of that, I accept it. So therefore, it's the best explanation for what I see. And then going off of that, premise two, there is a contingent fact that includes all other contingent facts. So basically, it's just stating the world exists, and it's a collection of contingent facts. And because it's a collection of contingent facts, it is also contingent. And I mean, I've discussed it with others, and they say it's a fallacy of composition, but I don't believe it's a fallacy of composition because it is defined by the contingent facts that it contains. You want me to keep going, or you all want to input on that?
I'm drifting here. I'm trying to understand what pertinent facts brought you to theism.
I grew up Southern Baptist and kind of just what I believed in as a child. And then as I went to school and became educated, I started to look at different perspectives on things, and ended up actually watching one of Forrest Valkai's videos on evolution. So I'm trying to decide what path to take with my theism.
Okay. Well, let me jump in very quickly, Ryan. I don't mean to interrupt the flow of what you're saying,
Okay.
but I would like to reframe that where you're not deciding your path toward this or that. I think you are trying to determine what is true or what the facts support, and those determine whether you go this direction or that, right? I think we often will say, well, I decided to believe in God, or I decided not to believe. And I don't think it works like that. I think our beliefs happen more organically under the skin. Well, we admit to ourselves and to other people might be something else. But in your mind, it sounds like you're not 100% convinced. I mean, are you 100%, 90%? And which God, if we're talking about a theistic deity, which deity would it be?
I would say it's a theistic deity, but I can't really decide on who. I believe that there is a God. There's something up there, but I'm not going to commit to one dogmatic religion.
Okay, well, beyond religion, then what I'm hearing, make sure I got you. You think there is an agent, a deity with a proper name, a single God that is responsible for life, the universe, and everything. You're just not sure which deity that is?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm muted. My problem. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say that it's mostly because of this argument that I spoke to someone who studied theology back in college, and we got in a few arguments over it. And I never could find a way to, I guess, disprove the argument, and I essentially accepted it as the best explanation for the start of existence. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, my problem with your argument as far as contingent facts and all of that is that's already a presupposition, and there's a reason why this isn't why this is still discussed over and over again, why it's not just like, oh, yep, that's proof of a God, because there's so many things that we would have to agree on ahead of time to continue with the argument.
Okay.
And so that's my problem. And I'm not versed enough in philosophy to even begin to properly address all of the presuppositions, but you have to make a lot of presuppositions to move forward with that argument.
The presupposition, what would be some of the presuppositions for just saying that everything has an explanation?
That's a presupposition. Is to say that everything has to have an explanation is a massive presupposition.
But
because
we
can have brute facts. We can have facts that just are because they are, that don't have to have an explanation. So that's the problem with that argument. And I think have you talked to Jimmy yet? Because he might be a really fun one for you to call back with this specific argument.
No, this is my first time ever being on a podcast.
Okay, I got you. Thanks.
You're doing great. I think to myself, what leads you to a he, she, I don't know, it deity, a specific agent? How do you get there? You know, it has to be I'm a Trekkie, so I'm thinking the God thing, which is one of the original scripts for Star Trek: The Motion Picture. But I mean, how do you get to one deity, whatever it is?
Well, would you be willing to grant, just so I can go through the conversation, the principle of sufficient reason, just for now?
Well, state your definition of it for me to make sure I'm understanding you.
Every contingent fact has an explanation. So like a computer, it's contingent upon the fact that it was put together in a factory, it was manufactured, that everything has an explanation, a cause.
Okay, well, let's say I grant everything has a cause, which I think fine. Something caused something else to happen or whatever. I don't know. We can do the infinite regress, what caused the universe and what happened before the cause of the universe, et cetera. But what I want to know is if you're looking at the facts and you're looking at all of these things around us, which are apparent evidences for a specific theistic God, how did you get there? Why not multiple gods? Why not non-deity agents that put the universe together? Why not a what instead of a who? How did you get there?
So that kind of leads into premise 3 and 4. So premise 3 is basically there is an explanation of the fact because everything is contingent. It has an explanation. And then premise 2, what I was saying earlier, there's a collection of contingent facts. So the world itself is contingent, or that could be interpreted as the universe. And then therefore there's an explanation for the universe. And then because you have this infinite regress of contingent facts explaining contingencies, you would therefore need to introduce a necessary object to sort of break the contingency and start the initiation. And I kind of conclude that that necessary object is a singular entity. And I can explain why that is.
I mean, if we can do so briefly, I'd be curious.
Okay. So the reason I believe it's singular, because if there's a multitude of different entities, then it wouldn't necessarily be omnipotent and what's the best? All present.
No, I think omnipotent. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
But if I can stop you there, how do you know that it couldn't be multiple omnipotent agents working in tandem? How do you make that leap from, it has to be a single?
Because if there are multiple, then there would be a power imbalance, and they would not be they wouldn't be all powerful because there would be an imbalance between the different deities.
Well, what if they were also omnibenevolent? What if they worked absolutely in tandem with each other? They were all on message, on the same mission. They were fine with one plan implemented 4 ways. Right? They
Also,
divided and conquered.
Why do they have to be omnipotent?
Because if it is not omnipotent and it is limited to a certain space, it is bound by that space and contingent upon the space that it contains. So therefore, it cannot be bound and defined by space, because then it's essentially dependent upon it or contingent upon it.
It doesn't have to be bound by space, because then it would be contingent upon it. So you're saying we're talking about a deity that exists beyond rules, which means it could not be measured. But the fact that we do have things that are measurable proves the existence of a deity that operates beyond the physical world?
Could you run that by me one more time to make sure I'm tracking?
I think what I'm trying to say is, what I'm hearing is, you and I are bound by the laws of physics, but the fact that we are locked in that particular model, and that model has been set in place the way that it has been, proves that there is an agent, a single agent, an omnipotent agent beyond that model that doesn't have to operate by the laws of physics. Am I tracking?
Yes.
Well, there's an
simply because...
No, go ahead, brother.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that it's simply because it's a necessary being, and by definition it is like supernatural, because there has to be a supernatural, and I'm defining supernatural as something that doesn't fit in our laws and our understanding, because it has to be outside of that to be the source of contingency while also being self-explaining, which is the definition for necessary.
You forgive me if I have one more quick question, and then I'm going to just pinball back to whatever you've got.
No, please.
What I'm still hearing is really more of a deistic position. We can't put a face or a name on it, but it is some agent out there that kicked the machine into motion, right? I don't know if this is a variation on first cause, the watchmaker, whatever, the prime mover. But let's say that there was a specific deity that started it all and set the rules the way they are. If that deity is so invisible, undetectable, unmeasurable, uninvolved in our lives, why would it really matter to you and me?
I guess more so just for the fact of matter of knowing the truth. Like, I mean, I don't see any real evidence of it interacting. I mean, prayer doesn't work. I don't know how many times I've prayed and never got a response, but it's more so just the fact of the matter that whether it's true or not.
Does it change anything for you if that particular God that basically has, as you've said, no impact on anything in your life, what does it change for you to know, if that were to be true, for you to know that or not? That would be like knowing if a giant rubber ducky exists like 3 galaxies away that you'll never see, never, like, what would be the point of, what does that help you to know for a God like that to exist?
Well, I guess really nothing other than just the satisfaction of knowing whether there is or is not.
Yeah, I can't follow that. Here's my main issue, like back to your original argument, which to me just sounds like the Kalam argument. The problem is it require the main presupposition that I really can't get behind is that it requires that the universe must have a start, and therefore it must have a starter. And the problem is then you have to have a lot of special pleading for that starter to exist. So now we're saying that this doesn't apply to the starter of this thing that needs to be started. So the special pleading is where you lose me, and also the presupposition. And that's why the Kalam argument falls apart, in my opinion, really, really, really quickly. I think it's cool to like entertain and keep having this conversation, because we got to another cool part, which is like this more deistic God. And as Seth pointed out, like, not, what does that do for you,
I mean, I dig the fact, Ryan, that you're honest enough to say some pretty hard things out loud. I mean, what would
Yeah.
be in some places be considered pretty unpopular. And we don't see really any intervention. Things are kind of jacked up. We don't see answered prayer. I mean, I'm kind of sketchy. I'm kind of dubious about a whole lot of the claims that religions are making. I mean, that's a pretty good place to be, because it's obvious you have engaged real critical thought and you're thinking thoughtfully about all of these issues. And so I think a lot of the rest of it becomes rather esoteric. We get into, is there a being that is beyond space time, that doesn't have to operate by physical laws, but at the same time is constrained by requirements? I mean, you and I could probably have coffee and another coffee and another coffee and talk about that. But the most important part for me is that you are not constrained by any sort of high control dogma. You're not locked into a religious box. You're really asking questions, and you're not afraid to challenge when something that religion claims works doesn't work. And I think that's the headline. You're living on your terms and you're thinking for yourself. And I find that impressive. For what it's worth, I find it impressive.
I appreciate it, but where I live in the Bible Belt, I try not to bring up my personal feelings and share with family members.
Sometimes I feel like I crawl back and forth in the prone position, Ryan. Literally just look up occasionally for crossfire and try to get to wherever I'm going. But I don't know, that's all I've got. I'll hand it back to Eve. But I just, thanks for your transparency about the fact that you are dissatisfied with the dogmatic claims of high control religion. And now you're looking more into the big picture. And I think, hey, keep looking. And if you find something out, I want to know. Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
I agree with everything that Seth just said. And I think it would be worth you calling back when maybe somebody like Jimmy, because Jimmy will, rapid fire at your argument in ways that I cannot do. But yeah, that's my main issue, is that it sounds like the Kalam and the precepts are just way too much for me. So I would go look into that more. But I really appreciate you calling, and I appreciate the conversation. And like Seth said, deeply appreciate your intellectual honesty here.
Well, I appreciate you all having me, and I'd just like to leave with one thing, that the precept is kind of like a trend line for me when you're trying to map a regression line, off of your data points. You're trying to find the best explanation that fits with the most accurate modeling. So that's why I kind of accept that presupposition, because it isn't an absolute, but it's more so just a attempt to approximate.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just for me, I can't give into that precept.
Okay.
It's a pretty big leap for me, and the special pleading that comes if you do accept that precept, then you really lose me. So yeah, but I really do appreciate the call and the conversation, and you're welcome to call back anytime. And on Tuesday nights, I'm always looking for more theist callers too. So if you want to call back with more thoughts on this topic, would love to hear it.
All right, appreciate it. I'll review the
Yeah,
video and back time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Have a great evening.
Yep.
I mean, I don't want to get pedantic, but I hear really more deism there than I ever heard any theism. By the way, if you call Jimmy, he's much less emotional than I am. So you're probably in better hands, Ryan. Just saying.
Oh man, that's still so funny. He said your tone of voice sounded angry, and I don't think
it's
I've ever heard
probably
you sound angry.
I think it's the that I lace. It's funny, Eve. I do throw a little bit of a lace of sarcasm on my reframing of Bible stories, right? And some of it is a liberation exercise, because these are the things that used to control me. Adam and
Right.
Eve, and Noah built the ark, and all of these things. Moses freed the slaves, and Jesus was born in a manger, and all those things. And so now, the things that used to control me, I find liberation in sort of winking at them and using colorful language to describe them. But what's interesting is, while some people bristle, the words I'm using are still accurate. I mean, when I talk about Adam and Eve in the garden, I say, oh, so humankind originated from a cosmically conjured pair of garden nudists who chatted up talking snakes before engaging in a rebellious act of fruit munching and got kicked out of the... And when you say it that way, they get pissed and they're like, how dare you make fun of the story? And I'm like, what is factual? According to your book, what is factually inaccurate about... They were cosmically conjured, they were nude, they talked to a snake. I mean, all of those things are true. But he probably heard that language and thought maybe that was me going on offense. Maybe it was, but I don't know.
Well, it was valid. So just the claim of an angry tone of voice is very funny.
I mean, it's happened, but it's pretty rare. I'm pretty benign.
It's like when I get told, I get told I'm bitter, and what's the all kinds of stuff, but bitter comes up a lot, and that I seem miserable. And I'm like, have you ever talked to me for more than 2 seconds?
Don't you feel like, though, they're trying to discredit the witness? I mean, rather than address the argument, what they do is they say, well, look how miserable that godless person is.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, oh, here's what she said, and here's why it does or does not have merit. And I look at you, and that's the last thing I think is misery. I see somebody who's liberated and comfortable in her own skin and helping other people to do the same. And that's inspirational to me. So.
And then there's you, who's clearly just angry. So
I really am. I'm filled with rage.
Secretly believing and raging.
That's true.
Oh man,
it's true.
Well, should we take another caller? We've got a mix of atheist and theist, so maybe we'll give an atheist a chat. We can keep this call shorter so we can prioritize the rest of the theists. But let's talk to Troy. Let's see. Hey, Troy, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, of course. How can we help you?
And by the way, the theists are far more entertaining than anything I've got. You should probably move on right away.
Well, we'll keep it short and sweet.
If I may, before I go into my little question, I just want Seth to know it's okay to be emotional about the results of stupidity, because people are being really harmed. And you wouldn't be empathetic if you didn't have some feelings, you know. So you guys do great work. I'm kind of nervous. So anyway,
You're doing great.
um,
No, I think anger, outrage is often a necessary and appropriate response to the outrageous. Now, I do think there are some people
Yeah.
who are consumed by rage. Rage is sort of all
yeah,
they've got, or they simply have an unhealthy amount of just venom. Yeah, I think there is a line. But I mean, yeah, I get pissed off and I don't apologize for it. I think we all have our moments. But your point is well taken. Go ahead, Troy. What else you
it's
got for us?
it's very hard to think clearly when you're activated and
Yeah.
you're upset about things and you're raging. Oh my goodness, fear is a huge motivator. What I have for you is it's probably a fool's errand, but I have a family member who I'm kind of debating with. My family is very conservative, evangelical. For 50 years, I don't know too many people who are theists more than me, but for 50 years, I was a theist. And so my sister is kind of fundamentalist, and she kind of started our little debate with sending me over a book about Christian apologetics. Oh my goodness, it was almost unpalatable. But just to give you a little background, she has already kind of discounted blind faith. Okay, so at this point, we don't have to worry about any of the presuppositions or any of the faith stuff. She really wants to believe what's true, and she wants rational arguments for it. And I'm pretty sure there is none. You guys wouldn't have a show if there was. This would have been over 16 years ago. But do you have any resources or material? This is, I guess it's really hard, but is there anything that's succinct and straight to the point? Anything I can give to her? Because what she's asking for in return is material. I was thinking about sending her some podcasts, or like if you could say something that's, I mean, like I said, it's kind of a fool's errand, but what's the most compelling thing you have that's to people who are defenders of apologetics? Because that just, I have
We'll
such
get
a
her home
disdain for
address, and Eve
that kind
can
of
go and
dishonest.
sit in her living room and say, "Look, here's what I'm
Oh
thinking."
my God.
No, I'm just.
Uh,
It's just
um,
the dishonesty is so obvious and so difficult to approach. There's just a long-term, deep-seated presupposition that's in place.
I think the main thing is you're not going to be able to just like send her some book that's like atheism is true, because atheism is just a position of disbelief. And so we have to remember that the burden of proof is on the person making the claim. And so if she's convinced that this is true, she's got to present good reasons to you why it is, not the other way around. I think
Yep.
there's all kinds of amazing content out there. Like I said earlier, listening to Seth's podcast and listening to a
Yeah.
lot of Matt Dillahunty stuff. I was just watching debates. That was really impactful.
Yeah.
But the thing about being indoctrinated and being, um, a devout conservative evangelical is that your brain is wired to just keep finding little arguments here and there. And so it's like trying to, what's that game? Like whack-a-mole. Like you get one and then this
Yeah.
other, well, but what about this? And then suddenly the Shroud of Turin comes up and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
that it's very productive, especially with family members. This is just my personal take.
You
To
got to
to
start somewhere.
go off it
I
like
can't
that.
just let. But so you're saying maybe just start with basic epistemology. I mean
Yep.
that makes sense. You have to start with something. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think making sure that you're asking lots of questions and approaching it with curiosity, I found that to be the most impactful. So, asking, I'm curious why you believe this, and just keep asking
Yeah,
why.
I
Be
know,
like
but
the
they don't
3-year-old,
make
like
any
why,
sense.
what, how, and then say that. Say it doesn't make sense. I'm not convinced. And then you guys are. What's going to happen is you're probably going to reach a point where it's a moot point. There's nothing more to talk about it. If she's genuinely trying to deconvert, then she's going to have her specific questions that she needs to go
Yeah.
find, like we all have done. I had to, I don't know
She throws
everyone's
apologetics.
exact journey, but I had to do that.
What comes at me is just basic, unrealistic, illogical Christian apologetics. And I would say, hey, let's make it a moot point. Let's agree to disagree, except for the teeny tiny, weensy little problem of it's harming people. And I care about people. And when I see people suffering, it moves me. And I know I've suffered, and I know she's suffered. It's just not okay. Maybe I just need to be patient, but and I appreciate Seth's very mannerly, very appropriate, very non-Dillahunty approach, and maybe that makes inroads with maybe that makes inroads with certain people. I don't know, but anyway.
All right,
you guys have been helpful. Actually,
Matt and I are like matter and antimatter, and occasionally we have exploded and had those conversations. Our approaches are very different. It is true. But I have thoughts very quickly, Troy, if I may. Will you indulge me?
Yes, of course.
I hear the same story with you that I have gone through in my own life. So what happened is I had an evangelical parent who totally disagreed with the fact that I had left the fold, right? I was now the prodigal who needed to be rescued and brought home.
Mm-hmm.
So what she said was, you know what? Whatever's true, I do want to know that. So you give me some of the books that you've got that prove your point, and I'm going to give you some of the books that I've got that show you my point. And we'll just meet afterwards and we'll get together and we'll find out. Well, this was not, hey, let's find out what's true. This was, I'm going to defend a position, right? So I think my suspicion is, because at first you said that your mother was on a quest for truth, but then you said she was using apologetics. Apologetics translates speaking in defense, meaning she is taking a defensive posture to try to protect and promote a position that she already holds. We call these identity beliefs. She is a closed system, right? She is sending, she is not receiving. What I also hear is that you have taken it upon your shoulders to fix her or change her mind or rescue her from a dogmatic and wrong-headed belief system. And I think that's admirable. I think it means you're compassionate, that you care. But it's like trying to get an alcoholic not to drink. At some point, we have to realize that they are going to be responsible for their own journey. It's simply not going to be possible for you to make her think or unthink away on a specific thing.
Yeah.
I think these conversations need to start with lowering expectations. I think you don't walk in and say, I got to convince her because she's deluded and it's damaging. I think that's an unrealistic goal. I think you are destined for frustration. You will leave with your muscles tight and you'll be frustrated and you'll look for the next set of words or books or apologetics or podcasts or videos because maybe those will make a dent. This is not how identity beliefs work. She is protecting a belief system that she has branded onto her.
Oh no. Seth, if you can hear us,
We've
hit
lost
refresh.
Seth. While we wait for
still there?
Seth to refresh. We lost Seth for a second, Troy, so I'll chat with you for now. But I just wanted to touch on part of what Seth's saying, and what I had to learn for myself is to not carry over my evangelizing that I was taught, because I don't know exactly how you grew up, but I grew up feeling very responsible for the souls of other people and feeling like it was my job to convince them, and feeling like it's my responsibility to let everyone know what I believe and why I believe it and have good reasons, which ultimately led to me deconverting because I realized I didn't have good reasons. But I had to let go of a lot of that especially when it came to family, because that just wasn't, like Seth was saying, I was never going to be able to move forward in those relationships if I didn't find some closure for myself.
I hate to interrupt you, but it's not necessarily her. It's it's kind of the results that happen. Like, she votes, she harms people. Those are the people that I care about the most, and it starts where it hits most at home, and that's my family. So, I really wouldn't care if she believed in goblins and unicorns. That just wouldn't matter to me. But I mean, she operates in the world, and she votes, and she has there are bad outcomes that are based on illogical positions, and that's what hurts the most. I mean, if it was true, that would be one thing. If it was well reasoned, that would be one thing. But it's hard to watch.
But I think that's part of the inner work of leaving religion and leaving family members behind that are in it. The inner work is having to accept that we can't rescue everybody. We can try. I'm an activist, so obviously I don't think that we should just like sit back. But a big part of why I'm able to do this sort of work is because I have learned that I can't save everybody, that I'm not responsible for all of this, and that it's good to have that passion. It's good to care. It's good to acknowledge that harm is being done. And it's also really good for your own sake, for your own mental health, to know it's not on you to solve all of the problems.
Yeah, that's really good perspective. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, of course.
Well
Just
done.
in time for Seth to be back.
Seth to get back.
Sorry about that. No, I was thinking I could. I didn't even know what I said, and then I thought, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It was really good.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Thanks, Troy. Though appreciate you, brother.
Okay.
Thank you, Troy.
Hey, man,
Have a
I
great
appreciate
evening.
you guys taking my call. Thanks a lot. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Of course.
So I tend to
Bye.
bloviate. I get. Do you get this way, like when you're passionate about something, you just start getting into it before you know it? I think, dear God, take a breath. Feel free to interrupt me and shut me up. Because,
No, I'm loving this.
the host in me will start to monologue, and then I'm like, dear God, Seth, please. But
That's my favorite.
I worry about. I used to be that. Like, if I just show them, then they will see.
Right.
And then I try to remember me when I was 25, 30, 35 even, maybe not 34, but when I truly believed, if someone had come and said, everything you believe is bullshit, would I've said, you know what, thank you for that information. And I was sloughed off my chains, and I would have frolicked off into Reasonville and said, oh, I am now liberated. It just doesn't work that way. And when we better understand the psychology of belief and how we're all guilty of having identity beliefs, we protect them, we get emotional, we get defensive, we stop listening. There were all these conversation stoppers. The meme verse is full of them. And more tragically, Troy seems to have taken this all on his own shoulders. And I think, dude, man, that's a burden you do not need to carry. It's not yours to carry. Live authentically in the hopes that an opportunity presents itself. But holy cow, man, you don't have to live with all that. So that was my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and it's so interesting for me. One of the biggest influences on me feeling finally comfortable enough to question my faith and all of that, I had moved out to LA and I was a nanny, and this mom I was working for was not religious. I think she was ex-JW, and she knew that I was a Christian. Of course, I pulled my whole I'm a sweet Christian girl. I'll make a great nanny, all of this. And she was like, cool. I'm not religious. I'm not raising my kids to be religious. So you can make vague mentions of God and stuff and what you believe. She's like, but I just ask that you not be teaching my kids this stuff. And I thought that was totally fair. And so I didn't. And I knew she wasn't religious. I was being respectful of that. And then she proceeded to be the most loving, kind, amazing person who trusted me with her kids. And the influence that she had by never discussing religion with me was incredible. Because you're right. If she had sat down and been like, you're crazy, and I don't want you telling my kids this insane bullshit, I wouldn't have kept working for her, I'm sure. But instead, she just was so loving and kind. And that was the biggest question mark for me. How can someone who's not religious, who doesn't love Jesus, be so loving and kind? Because I've been taught that that's not possible. So the best witness to me for non-belief was actually someone just being themselves and not having to convince or deconvince me. Deconvince, not a word, but
No, I got you. I knew what you meant.
Yes, she just was herself. And that's always stood out to me, ironically, as I sit on TikTok posting like the most brutal things possible. But in
No,
my
but I think
day-to-day
that's
life,
different.
how I show up, I show up as just myself. I think
Yeah.
that's the best thing most of us have to offer for anything that we believe or don't believe.
It's funny. My tennis team went to sectionals this weekend, and we were all exhausted. We've been playing all day, and I was sitting there with a guy that I played a match with, and I don't know him very well, but we've known each other casually probably for over a year on the team. Hey, how's it going, Jeremy? Good to see you. Hey, how's it been? How are things? And then we go play a match, but we didn't know much about each other. Last night, we're sitting there drenched in sweat, exhausted. And he just makes conversation. So what is it you do for a living? And I have that cost benefit moment. You ever have that, Eve, where you're
I
like, oh,
hate that question
shit.
so much. Yep.
So, like, if I'm on a plane and I don't feel like dealing with it, I'm like, I'm a video producer. And then they
Right.
want me to go deeper. And if I don't, they think it's porn. And I'm like, no, well, so do I just tell them I'm an atheist podcaster or do I say secular? Because then you have to explain or define. I mean, I literally have this cost benefit. How do I want to get into it right now?
Yep.
But last night I was sitting next to him. He said, well, what do you do for a living? And I said, I know it's a bit controversial in this state, but I am an ex-evangelical former Christian radio host who now hosts a podcast and platform for atheists and secular humanists. And he could tell he kind of went like he didn't know what to do with it, but he already knew and liked me personally. Like we just played a match together and we high-five each other and we laugh, we carried on. And so he wasn't able to put me in a box. I totally messed up any categories that he might have. And I'm guessing he's a Christian because of his reaction. But before the conversation was over, and we didn't go deep, and I'm glad we didn't, but it was like, so what do you talk about? And I was able to say in a way that didn't put him back on his heels.
Yeah.
I do have my issues with high control religions, with fundamental faiths, and we have those conversations. But my focus right now is equality, is making sure that we are not a state church, that people have the right to be religious or not religious across the board, state church separation, protecting the Constitution, and making sure that we're building a world for all of us, right? I'm strategically using language that's not, I'm trying to tell everybody that Noah's Ark is bullshit because it's the stupidest story I've ever heard. Like I could have said it, right? But instead I said, right now, I'm just trying to go after the people who are trying to strip rights and sell lies. And that was like, that is the first step in what I think may become a longer conversation. Didn't try to bite off the whole pie at one time. We just started that little crack that might let in the light. And I don't know where that's going to go. But I think if Troy tries that, just set expectations, go easy. I don't know. It's just an anecdote that I thought might relate to the call we just had.
No, I think that's really good. Yeah. And I think it's important for people to hear from us who are activists that show up and do this, and we say really intense things online, because there's a difference between saying things on this sort of platform or in general terms, and then having a conversation in a relationship, in a connection. When you're sitting there human to human, it does have to come out differently. I'm not sitting, like the things I write in my Instagram, flashes across my face and it's saying things like, Noah's Ark is insane and ridiculous and that never happened. I'm not going to just sit there and say that to a human being. There's a big difference between generalizing when you're speaking to a large group of people all at once to provoke conversation, and then how you handle actual conversations in a more epistemological approach.
That's so good. It's so good. Yeah.
Are you ready for another call?
I am indeed.
All right, let's see what we got here. Let's talk to Harry. Hey, Harry, how are you?
I'm good, Eve. Seth, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Thanks for taking my call.
Of course. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, so you guys are talking about the subject you're talking. Actually, I'm from India, so I have a different faith, different religion, different ideas. than Christianity. But I have studied all the religions. I have studied basically all the religions of the world for the last 24 years. And I have developed some ideas based on that, what religion talks about, what the meaning of religion is, what the meaning of God is. And my ideas are a little different than mainstream Christianity and all that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what it is you believe. Are you a theist? Do you believe in a god or multiple gods? What would you consider yourself?
Yeah, I believe in God, but like listening to you guys, like you guys are, religion was forced on you guys, and I sympathize with you guys on that. No religion was ever forced upon us. Like in our culture, nobody forces the religion on anybody.
Yeah, I think it would probably depend on how you define force. I'm sure my parents would say they didn't force it on me, but yeah, I was indoctrinated into it. I grew up in it. That's very fair to say.
Yeah,
But
indoctrinate.
I'm interested to hear what God you believe in and why you believe in that God.
Okay, I am a Sikh. Sikhism is the newest religion. It's only 500 years old, and it's the 5th largest religion in the world. And it's pretty radical religion, different than, it's not, basically, in other religions, there are stories about gods, like in Christianity, but in Sikhism, there are no stories. It's actually philosophies. So it explains basically like the stories in Christianity, Adam and Eve and all those stories. Those are stories based upon certain philosophies. And in Sikhism, those philosophies are detailed, explained, and that's what I study.
Okay. So you'll have to forgive me. I'm not super familiar with Sikhism. I know a little. You guys believe in a personal God, though, right? You believe in one God?
Yes. The God we believe in it, we call it.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, the God we believe in is called Akal Purkh, means an abstract entity, an entity beyond space and time.
And why do you believe in this God?
Why do I believe it, or why our religion believes?
No. Why do you believe that this God exists?
Okay, I have two reasons. One is a personal story, a couple of my personal stories, and then I have been studying religion. I have not been particular religion. I'm not like church-going type of religious person, but I have been studying religion. I've been, practicing, not practicing, but studying basically different religions. So do you want to hear my personal story, or you want hear my ideas?
Seth can answer. I'm most interested in whatever you think is the most compelling reason to believe in that God. But
no, I think I mean, I'm interested in the answer to Eve's question. Why did you choose this particular faith with this deity? What specific thing or things?
This particular faith comes from, we are Sikh, so I am born in a Sikh family, so we read the scriptures. So that is the answer to why this God. But something happened with me when I was a child. I was like 9 years old, and I was adopted by my uncle, and then we used to live in a city, but in the summer holidays, we used to come visit our family in the village. So I was visiting the family in the village. I was only 7, 8 years old, and it was a holy day. Holy means a festival of colors where we play with colors. The kids play with colors, right? And somebody threw a bucket of water on me on the holy day. So I thought maybe somebody just threw a colored water on me. And the next morning, when I was laying in the bed, my brother tried to wake me up. He wanted to pull me out of the bed. He said, let's go play. But I was not able to move. And he kept insisting that I play with him. So he pulled me out of the bed, and I just collapsed on the floor. And my dad was sitting there and watching us, and he got up, and then he picked me up, and he took me to the doctor. So my body was completely paralyzed. And he went from one doctor to another. And finally, when all the doctors said that I have polio and there is no cure for polio, my father came back, but he did not give up on, he wanted me to get better no matter what. So he didn't give up. One of his friends was a Brahmin. He was like a Hindu priest. So he called him. My dad was the chief of the village. He was a prominent man. So he called on this guy and consulted him. He said, can you do anything for my son? And he said, well, not much, but I can see what I can do. So he told my dad that he can do the prayer for me, and there is a 50-50 chance that I can get better or not. So my dad said, do the prayer and let's see, we'll take the 50% chance. So he did the prayer for me. He did a couple of hours of prayer. And at the end of the prayer, he told my dad that on this particular day, if he begins to recover, he will recover 100%. But if he doesn't recover on this particular day, he doesn't start the recovery, he would never get better. So we kind of, I was paralyzed, so I used to have my two older brothers to take care of me, take me to the bathroom and stuff. And on that particular date that Brahmin had told us, my older brothers were holding me. I was sitting in the toilet seat, and I told my brothers to leave me. But they said, "Oh, you're going to fall down. Don't do that." And my father came, and he said, "Let's see, if he can listen to him, whatever he's trying to say." And then they left me, and I walked out of the toilet that day. Now this is my story. And
So
after that I recovered. After that I recovered 100%. Now I have one side of my body is about an inch shorter, but other than that, I'm perfectly normal.
first of all, I am so sorry that happened to you because that sounds really traumatic. And I'm so glad that you are okay. I have a couple of things to throw out, and maybe
Okay,
you can answer whichever one.
I have one more.
Yeah, let's get to that. But
little-
just to keep the call going, let's just we'll stay on track, and then you can get back to what you were going to say. But my first thing is, I'm not, throughout that whole story, I didn't hear anything that led me to think there was a God involved. In fact, I hear a lot of things making me think there was nothing supernatural involved because, like you just said, you said part of your body is still, did you say 1 inch shorter than the other? And I'm curious, why would a God heal you partially?
Okay. I'm not talking about God healed me or somebody else healed me. I'm just telling you the story. So
right. So wait, but is that story supposed to be one of the reasons why you believe? Just for time's sake, I'm just trying to get us a little bit more concise here.
Yeah, that's one of the stories. That is story when I was 7, 8 years old, and after that my life was perfectly normal, and I never even thought about that.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, so that sounds just like a story, which I'm so sorry again that you went through that. Glad you're okay. I'm not sure. I do like my question. So you don't think that God healed you? What do you think from that story? Do you think
not in the Christian sense? So I did not
in
make anything
in
out
any
of that.
sense?
Yeah. So until I went to engineering school, I did my engineering, I did my MBA. After MBA, I went back to my village, and we started talking about it, and I asked my mother. I asked her, I want to know the whole story. So she said, this is what she told me, that 2 years later, after I got better, my dad died. I was like 10 years old. And my mother told me that the neighbors, old lady, came to her and she started crying to my mother, and she wanted to tell her something. And my mother said, why are you afraid? Why don't you tell me what you're trying to say? And she said, your son, like me, did not have polio. They had done black magic on me. So the bucket of water that they had thrown on me was actually black magic on me. And then he said, this was the reason I got sick. And then what happened is, when my dad died, he had gone to, one of my uncles wanted to go see another Brahmin.
Hey, Harry, forgive me, my friend.
India.
Please forgive me. Please forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we simply do not have the bandwidth for a really, really long story. But what I'm hearing, and what I've only heard, and you tell me if I missed it, what I'm hearing is so-and-so said, well, we know you got sick, and we're very sorry that you got sick. But someone said it was black magic. But how would someone else know that? If you were healed by a specific deity, how would someone know that? There's not a lot we can sink our teeth into. So, I mean, I really need us to get to sort of the pinnacle of the story so we can address the claim and move on to the next call. Can you get us there quickly, my friend?
Yeah. So I didn't make out anything out of the story, but I thought there is something out there which we don't know. Now, I'm an engineer by profession. I'm an electrical engineer. I run my business and all that. So I got interested in knowing what could be behind that. So I started studying religion. So what I found out, what my ideas are, like I developed a theory about religion, about what this religion is. Like, for example, when we are talking about God and religion are words that has a definition. And unless we understand what God is and what religion is, we cannot for sure say, whatever is being preached in the church or in the temples and stuff, we cannot make sense of that unless we have a backup theory behind that or a backup story behind that. So I started studying that.
All right, hang on. I'm going to stop you, my friend. One thing that we do not have in this moment is momentum. I feel like we're drifting.
Mm-hmm.
So we at some point are going to have to put a punctuation mark on this thought. But what I have heard so far is you had an experience, the supernatural was involved, you are an educated engineer, and I believe, do I infer that you see engineering all around us? Maybe that's a kind of design or intelligence that you see. You see a blueprint at work, and you have landed on the deity of the Sikh faith as the most likely engineer that created all of everything. Am I close?
No. When I'm studying religion, not only Sikhism, I'm talking about Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism, everything. all of the religion are telling me the same story.
No, Harry, I've muted you. The audience can't hear you. Listen, this is not an open mic to talk about our theories or what we believe or what we're advocating for. This is a place where people call in to make an argument for what they believe. So if you don't have an argument, we're going to have to let you go, okay? I'm going to bring you back. Please, if you want to make an argument, do that. If you want to make an argument, do that. But if you just start telling us stories again, we're going to drop you. I will drop you.
No, I'm not telling you a story, but I am very nervous. So I have made the notes, and I don't know. I have never called before. This is my first time. So I really am not comfortable talking right now.
You're fine. I just, unfortunately, we're simply not, I don't think we are able in this format to be able to accommodate the extremely long form conversation that apparently this subject needs to have. My only thought at first blush would be if there was a designer, an intervener, we're back to who or what would it be and how would you know? How would you qualify design? How would you explain or excuse or rationalize bad design? A lot of that I think we've already covered. I don't know, Eve, have I missed anything on that score?
Yeah, no, I think the problem is this could have been dealt with just you had personal experience, and then there's other things that have now kind of lined up with that personal experience in your perspective, and it's reinforced those beliefs that you had. My last point real quick, because then I do think we should probably move on to another call. And if you want to call back another time when you have like a solid argument ready, then I would love to hear that. But what I do find really interesting is you started the call saying like you were sorry for us that we were forced to be religious and all that, and that you weren't. But you also said then when you went on that you grew up in Sikhism, that this is what you've known your whole entire life. And that's my story. I grew up in Christianity. That's what I knew my whole entire life. So to me, it sounds like a lot of confirmation bias. And I think for this to be a real call, we have to, like Arden said, thank you, Arden. My jet lag is kicking in clearly. We need a solid argument of this is the God I believe in, which you did a good job telling us that, and this is why. And I don't think we're getting to the why. But if you want to call back another time and you have like a clear, concise, a couple of sentences to say this is why, then we'd be happy to take your call in the future.
Yeah, the whole story, like I have jotted down 5 different philosophies here, which I've studied. So if I want to get from point A to B, it's a very, very long story, and I don't know how I can.
This isn't the right. This isn't the format for that, because this is where we're trying to actually engage in a conversation and have some back and forth going. And, that sounds like something more for you to have your own space to go and share that information if you have a lot of information. But this is not, as Arden said, this is not the platform for that. So we're going to let you go, but thank you for calling. If you want to call back sometime with like a clear, concise argument, we'd be happy to hear it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Harry. Bye-bye.
I heard Arden's voice out of the blue, and I thought,
the voice of
yes,
God.
Lord, I'll build an ark. I will take my firstborn to the mountain and place him upon the altar. Command me, Lord.
Yeah, sorry about, I don't mean to trample. I was going to butt in like 2 times before, and I was like, nope, the thread is gone this time. I got to do it.
Finally hit your threshold and said, no more. So that's awesome.
Are we ready for another caller? Seth, you want to pick the next one? Uh-oh, did we lose Seth again?
Oh, no.
No.
It's all right. Here, I'll put you up.
Okay, let's see. Which caller? Let's talk to an atheist for a second while I wait for Seth. David. Hey, David, how are you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, how are you?
Okay, good. I'm trying to adjust my distance from the microphone. If it sounds good, then I'm good.
It sounds good. For a second there, I could hear my own voice.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have it if you have the show on in the background or something.
Nope, I'm just connected to the call-in line.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, what's up? What did you want to call about tonight?
Well, I told the screener, just wondering how do you explain logical people believing in a God? I know that Seth and so many of you have previously been religious, and I was never religious. When I was a kid, I was religious because that's what they told me to do. But by the time I was 12 or 13, I think I decided for myself that it didn't make sense. So I'm wondering how do logical, intelligent people follow something so arbitrary for so long?
Yeah, I think every individual is so. Here, I'm going to mute you while I answer, just because we're getting some feedback, and then I'll unmute you. I think every individual is just so different. And so the impact of indoctrination, what level of indoctrination, the culture they're growing up in, how their family is, all of that has a big part to play. And also confirmation bias, and then the experiences you have that can validate or invalidate the indoctrination that's occurring. So there's so much there. And cognitive dissonance plays a massive role, because some of the smartest people I know, that I deeply respect when it comes to pretty much everything else in life, believe that there's a God, and obviously I don't believe that. So that's my short answer. Seth, I don't know how much you heard of the question, but
I do.
David's just asking, how much.
Yeah, please forgive my
how can
connection
somebody-
issues. It's been, ever since I got back from Sarnia, it's been one thing after the other. My laptop got smashed on the road somehow. My glasses, these are replacements because my glasses got snapped, and my modem fried. So I replaced the modem, but for some reason I'm still having the occasional connection freeze.
Obviously,
So if I
you're
do
being
drop,
attacked by the enemy.
it is the devil. The devil doesn't like
Yeah.
it when you step on his toes. That's what
You're
the
right,
pastors
right.
used to say.
And I
You know,
have David muted for the feedback, but I'll unmute David after you answer.
no, I got you. I got you. It's funny. Churches call it the 4 to 14 window, right? When you get people at a young, impressionable age and you make a specific culture their normal. And, if you were to take an 18-year-old and tell them the tales of Scripture as fact for the first time, they'd probably laugh in your face or go, "Are you crazy? Are you drunk?" Whatever. You take somebody at 8, someone who is children are trust machines, and they rely on their guardians for shelter and clothing and food, and teach them how to tie their shoes and don't get into the car with strangers, and here's how the world works. And that person, that guardian that you trust with everything that you have, tells you that there is an invisible eye in the sky, and that Noah built the ark and Jesus came and died on a cross, and we're all born sinners and we deserve hell, or whatever. That gets programmed in early. Then you get reinforcement, because often you are placed in an ideology first environment, a home that reinforces it. Maybe you're taken out of public education. Now you're in a Christian homeschool or a private religious institution that teaches out of the Bible. I had science classes that were formatted through Scripture, which means they weren't science classes. It was terrifying. But that was something that I was just sort of programmed with. Then you get a kick to the ego because you feel smarter than everybody else. Hey, I'm fortunate enough to have been born into the right home and the right religion at the right time, and everybody else is deceived. Well, that feeds my self-esteem. That feels good. And you get a sense of purpose. It alleviates the fear of death. There are cultural consequences. So if I start to say something unpopular, I might lose friends. I might lose family. I might lose my job. My spouse might leave and threaten to take the kids. There's all of these things that are going on. And the final thing I'll throw out is this. There's something that goes out there, an argument that only idiots could believe idiotic things. I wrote a book called Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot. Okay. But I wasn't an idiot. My IQ did not change from the time I was a Christian to the time I was an atheist. But often intelligent people are better at rationalizing irrational things. They're better at at connecting dots that were never meant to be connected. They're better at outsmarting themselves. And so that's why we find a lot of people who are wicked smart, who are Bible believers, Quran believers, or they buy into other bizarre ideas, ghosts and goblins and everything from healing crystals to chakras to Reiki to chiropractic to whatever. I mean, you'll find very smart people who have compartmentalized an irrational belief, and they're smart enough to know how to defend it. So that's my short or my long answer to your short question, David. Did I get close at all to the mark, my friend?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, yeah, Seth, that was just a marvelous response. You're very good at what you do.
Oh, you're right. Well, I just want to give you, I beat myself up. Seth, you were 37 before you stopped to actually challenge the idea that a donkey spoke Hebrew.
That's what I'm wondering. Why? Why did it take that long?
There are probably 500 factors. And, a lot of it has to do with identity. A lot of it has to do with not wanting to be cast out by my community. A lot of it is fear-based. Some of it, I think there's so many reasons. But we have to get away from this idea that if someone believes a dumb thing, they are all around a dumb person. It doesn't work like that. Beliefs don't work like that. And honestly, I don't want our approach to be looking down our noses from the high mountain at the slobs, at the unwashed slobs, and say, all of those idiots down there. Yeah. Because I guarantee you the people on the high mountain have held and may continue to hold some idiotic beliefs as well, because we are all human beings. And I think these conversations need a little more grace. Hey, let's see them as human beings first and see where that takes us, for what it's worth.
Right. Well, as I had mentioned, I think when you were offline, I was not really indoctrinated with the religion. It was kind of, here and there. We go to church, and you're told all the stories. But by the time I was a young teenager, I realized, this doesn't make sense. Why would a God infinitely torture a soul for not coming around? That's just the craziest thing.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting. People like Seth and myself, who are now here trying to be very logical. It's not like our brains changed overnight as soon as we stopped believing. It's not like, suddenly we became. I'm sure that over time we've gotten better at critical thought and all of that, but it's not like suddenly we became intelligent and we were completely stupid the day before. So keeping that in mind, it shows how powerful cognitive dissonance can be and compartmentalizing these things. So it's not a matter of is a person logical or not. I know so many logical people that have this one thing that they are just completely not following any logic at all about. And I think most people have something in their life like that, whether it's a teeny tiny thing or a really big thing. For me, it happened to be a really big thing that took up my whole life and changed everything when I let it go. But who I am didn't just change. That's why also the whole argument about it being mental illness, I can't get behind that either. I wasn't mentally ill one day, and then the next day it's gone because I stopped believing in a God, Anyways, I hope that all makes sense. Seth said it much better than I did.
Not at all. Not at all. I muted his call quickly because there was some
yes,
he's got a monitor up. Does that answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, I think so. And then just in parting, I'd say the current day most prevalent cognitive dissonance is the MAGAs. No doubt.
That's a whole other show. You're going to open that can of worms here, David? Is that what you're going to do?
You're
going to drop the bomb and leave? Is that what you're going to do?
Yep.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks so much for calling.
Thank
you. Bye.
All right, come on, Eve. Come on. What's the dumbest thing you ever believed when you were in the faith? And I'll tell you mine.
Oh my God.
Come on. Give me a good one.
So many things. We went through a time period where gold dust was happening, and I don't know if you've heard of all of this, like the whole glory gold dust thing. Oh, we still have the call going. That's why that's happening. Sorry. Did you ever hear about gold dust or glory
I
dust?
can't recall. What do you
This was
mean
like
gold dust?
oh, this is great. We believed that gold dust was falling out of not the sky actually, because we were in the church building. So falling out of the ceiling, and people would like go like this, and all of a sudden there'd be gold dust from heaven all over them. They would shake their hair and gold dust would come out. I was a child, and I took a strip of tape and I went and would like stick it and get the glitter and the gold dust, and I kept it in my Bible and truly thought that I had gold dust from heaven. It's so clearly craft glitter that somebody did something with, but yeah, I fully believed that God was sending gold dust
All right, here's
through
my
the
confession.
ceiling. Please
I
be worse than mine.
believed that men had one fewer ribs than
Oh, I
women
believe that too. I
because
believe
God
that
had
too.
taken Adam's rib. All I had to do literally was take a finger and go 1, 2,
Start
3, 4.
counting.
Right? All I had to do was
Uh,
count. And I just believed, no, we have one fewer ribs. Never bothered to check. It's funny when you're
right.
raised in a culture of assurance, when you have the answer with a capital A, this is not a
Yeah.
fact checking culture. Like you and I were not trained to go out and
No.
doubt. Right. So,
Right.
but I feel so dumb. I'm just like 1,
Uh,
2, 3. It would have taken me 10 seconds to verify or disconfirm. It's a shame. I feel shame.
uh,
All right, go ahead.
we
Go ahead.
did our best. We did our best.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, we've got a few more calls that we can get to now. Let's
I
talk
got
to
a note here real
Jasper.
fast from Arden. We want to thank our
Oh yes.
screener, Stephanie Helms, who has been
Thank you,
bringing the good
Stephanie.
stuff, Stephanie.
You are the best.
Call screening is such an inexact science. You just never know what you're going to get. And we've had some good conversations. So props to Stephanie
Yeah.
for everything you've done.
Thank you, Stephanie. Really appreciate you. Now we've got Jasper. Hey, Jasper, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. What did you want to talk about tonight?
What did you believe?
Sorry, what's that? We might have lost Jasper.
Jasper, you're using the web client. You have to make sure that your phone doesn't like, go to sleep. There you go. Oh, I thought I heard him for a
Jasper?
second.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
There we go.
Hey, Jasper.
Hey.
So what was your question for us tonight?
When did you
All right.
leave Christianity?
Well, this show is not really for Seth and I to start talking about ourselves. So we're more interested in what is it that you wanted to talk about? Like if there's a God you believe in or why. The notes here say that you want to talk about reincarnation or tarot cards.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
We might need to, yeah. I'll
We can bring it
return
back.
this to Q.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to Kyle. Let's see. Hey, Kyle, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. What do you want to talk about?
All right. So I'm kind of after listening to the show for a couple weeks, you guys got me thinking, and I always like to challenge my Christian friends, family, whatever, and they just keeping me in question. The question is faith, and they keep giving me examples like you have faith, like let's say you get paid on Friday. You have faith from Saturday to Thursday that you're going to get your next check the following Friday. Or you have faith that if you sit in a chair, it's not going to break. Or going through a green light, you have faith that the other cars will stop. I didn't know if you guys had a...
I don't have faith in any of those things. I
Right.
trust I trust that this chair is going to do what every chair has done for me when I sit in it, and it's going to be a chair. I trust that, and I don't fully trust, which is why I have car insurance, and which is why I also look and I practice defensive driving. I trust that as society, we're going to pay attention to the traffic lights because I have to. It's a risk I have to take in order to drive and go places. I I don't have faith in any of those things, but that would depend on how you're defining faith, I guess.
For sure. Good point. Good point.
I like to say it this way, Kyle. I've been told that I have faith that the sun will rise tomorrow. But I'm like, well, actually, no. What I have is a reasonable expectation based on the rotation of the Earth and our orbit around the sun and 4 point whatever billion years of previous sunrises that the sun will rise tomorrow, right? You have an expectation of a paycheck because you signed a contract and you are working for an employer who has a model in place to pay their employees. And you have a long track record of being paid every 2 weeks on a Friday. So you have a reasonable expectation. So that's not blind faith. You don't just know it in your heart. You have a reason to expect that these things might be true. And I think people like to weaponize the word faith. It's like when I rattled off those apologetics arguments, it takes more faith to be an atheist. And I'm like, it just does. It's one of those things that people tell us because they want to paint us using religious language, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Anything else?
Okay, so well, I don't want to look crazy. I know people are going to hate on the idea of atheism just because they don't understand that it's literally just a lack of belief. So whenever you guys transitioned from theism to atheism, did you, because I don't want to look crazy, like, last week I was a Christian, this week I'm atheist. Did you guys kind of work your way around it with time, or did you guys just immediately, tell your friends and family that, I just lack belief. It just doesn't make sense?
You're muted.
If that makes sense.
I don't.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. For me, that totally makes sense. So it took me a little longer. I didn't call myself an atheist. I just said I stopped believing, and I was pretty upfront with that. But also the reactions for people that found out immediately and the reactions from people that found out, a year or two later was the same. So I don't know that that's a great way to gauge that. I think what's really cool is being able to be honest and be authentic. I don't think you have to go announce anything either. But if somebody asks you and you don't believe something anymore, then I think that's okay for you to want to say, yeah, you know what? It's crazy. If you want to hear more about my process, I stopped believing that. And I am happy to tell you or not tell you or whatever. But you also don't owe anybody that information either. So,
good point. Man, that's good.
But Seth, I'm sure has some.
No. I can't add anything to that. Just perfectly said.
Man, it's just funny how, whenever you hit it, like whenever you jump into it, just believing, and then whenever you bring the question in, it just really, really does deconstruct the faith a lot. And now, what do you do? I grew up in a super religious household. I know that mental illness runs in my family, and my mom just holds to it. Like, she literally told me today, if the Bible is wrong, I don't want to be right. So it's just like, you can listen to Christians, and it's not even the atheists that'll deconvert you. The Christians will do it on their own. So I don't know how to.
But isn't that an interesting example, though? That's an interesting case study in Christianity isn't just what she thinks. It's who she is, right? And if Christianity was to be proven false, it would be like amputating a limb for her. And so she's actually being more honest than some by saying, you know what? Even if it's crap, I'm still going with it. Right? I'm still going to literally
Right.
attach this myself to this specific belief because it serves me in some way. Not because it's factually true, not because it's been verified, not because it's even moral, but because it's part of me. It's what I know. It's
Yeah.
who I am. And I think that tells
Right.
us a little bit about how identity beliefs work. And honestly, I mean, she's more honest than many when it comes to,
For
her
sure.
own faith. That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Good point. Now,
But
okay. Like we can all be. Go ahead.
oh, no. You go ahead.
Okay. So I've recently been playing with the idea of the evolution thing, and my question is, I'm sure you guys would agree that it's worth the time to go ahead and backtrack and be like, okay, we want to blame God on this. Let's find out the real reason for it. Like, where do you start? Where do you start to backtrack and really be like, okay, if that's not God, there's got to be a reasoning, and then you got to study and all that other good stuff.
Well, so Kyle, am I correct in that you're like newly deconstructing and kind of questioning your faith? Is this all newer to you?
Absolutely,
Cool. First
man.
of all, I
Yeah.
just want to tell you, I'm so proud of you. It is really hard to question something like this, especially, you're telling us your mom and how firmly she holds these beliefs. So that's amazing that you're even able to ask these questions, and that's super brave of you. I think,
Man, thanks.
first of all, my biggest piece of advice to you would be to get used to being able to say, actually, I just don't know, because that's going to end up happening a lot. That
Right.
happened to me a lot. I learned a lot too. And then I was able
Yeah.
to go back and be like, well, now I do know it's this, this, and this. But I was homeschooled using
Right.
a Christian curriculum. I was not taught a proper science education. And so it took me, I'm still relearning so many things. So, that being said, first of all, just get used to being like, I don't know yet, but this doesn't make sense.
Right.
This doesn't cut it as far as evidence and reality goes. But there are so many
For
amazing
sure.
resources. Recovering from religion, they're absolutely amazing. Uh, they're going to have some resources for you. Forrest, I don't know if you've ever watched him on here. He has
Oh yeah, I love
his
them.
channel where yeah. So there's places like that, and then just reading a lot. I just went and got like every book I could about all the things I didn't feel like I knew enough about. I asked all my questions. And so I think looking at it as a long term, as just like a new mindset of wanting to learn instead of like, now let me go find all these answers, is going to be so much better for you. I think learning to let go
Right.
of things that don't match reality and say, okay, you know what, I don't believe that anymore. But don't feel so much pressure to go fill in a blank. Give yourself all the time it takes to kind of re-educate yourself and learn, and keep your mind
For sure.
open to continue learning from now on,
Yeah.
If I can
Yeah. Good
jump in
point.
quickly, Kyle, if opening a book and
Yeah.
taking a deeper dive seems a bit overwhelming, let me start you with a video that is on my channel. I shot
Okay.
this with Dr. Donald Prothero. He is a geologist, paleontologist. He's written 35 books. He's one of the smartest people I have ever met or seen. He's amazing. And he
Right.
has a book called Evolution: What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters. Well, I had seen
Okay.
a speech version of that message of his examples, but it was like at Caltech or something, and it was horribly shot. I mean, they just didn't have the facility, they didn't have the lighting, didn't have the cameras. But I thought his message and the material was so amazing that I actually reached out and I said, "Look, I'm going to be in Dallas on this day. You're going to be in Dallas on this day. I'm going to bring a camera rig. Would you be open to giving this speech to a live audience?" And we set up a live audience, and he came in and did Evolution: What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters. I think it's about 45 minutes of video, right? So you're not reading, you can actually watch slides, examples, and he does a great job of laying it out. It's a nice primer on evolution. So Google
Yeah.
search or YouTube search The Thinking Atheist, and then Evolution: What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters. And when you get 45 minutes, sit back, watch it, and make that one of your first steps. And I think that'll be kind of a gateway speech or a gateway presentation to some of the deeper dives on evolution by natural selection. Okay?
Right on. Thanks.
Groovy. Thank you.
I
Thanks so
I
much,
have
Kyle.
I have no argument. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
I thought of another one, Eve. I used to
Let's hear it.
think that the Grand Canyon was made by Noah's flood,
Oh, yep. I
which
definitely
is a
thought that one
total
too.
Ken Ham argument, and it's a total Ken Ham argument. But I was like,
Absolutely.
and I didn't even. I was just like, it just all the water because the water rained down from the sky, but the earth also opened up, right? And water
Right,
came
of
out of the
course.
core of the earth because, of course, there's oceans under the
Obviously.
earth's crust, and that explains the Grand Canyon. That was another dumbass belief that I held for far too long. Anyway,
I
sorry, I'm just
remember getting really confused because, and maybe I'm going to mess this up now, but no, because in the Bible, you know, the serpent goes and deceives Eve, and then he has to slither on his belly. And then I was like, okay, so then how come we still have lizards? And, you know, I was just very confused, you know, as like this 10-year-old child learning this. Like, so are these like the good one? Do these guys like go to God and be like, we're not with him? And then like the other snakes that do slit, like none of it made sense.
Eve,
But
did they tell you that the reason childbirth hurts is because of Eve? Did you learn that?
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's why
Childbirth
I did
sucks.
my whole Eve was framed was because everything I would complain about in life as a teenager, my parents would be like, well, Eve and the curse. That's where that
Yes.
like all of
No,
it.
and a lot of people don't, and I know you know this. I was setting you up, Eve, by the way. But because I know the theme of your work. But it's interesting as part of Eve's curse, part of that was that she would have sexual desire for her husband, right? So
Right.
after Eve fell, part of her curse was that she would be hot for her husband who would rule over her. Oh my God, what does that say about the patriarchal nature of
It's
the authorship
insane.
of Genesis? Her
Right.
curse was to be submissive, and if she's hot for her husband, that's part of what Eve's, I don't know, tainting of God's master plan. It's so jacked up. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it kind of just tells on itself as soon as you lay it out
Yes.
like that. It's like, well, obviously there's an agenda here.
Yeah.
Oh, I also believe that dinosaurs were a scam and that scientists had all gotten together. All the scientists got together and were like, let's lie and get people to be atheists, and we're gonna plant these dinosaur bones everywhere.
Come
That's what I
on. Like
actually believed.
I've heard this one, but I'd never actually met anyone who thought
Well,
that they
here
were
I am.
plants. They were plants.
Well,
They dug a hole and they put like a giant femur in the ground to deceive people.
oh yeah,
Okay.
fully. I mean, I also thought dinosaurs were cool, so I like felt guilty because sometimes I would start believing in dinosaurs, and I was like, no, that's
Wow.
wrong. That goes against the Bible, so I can't. Yeah.
You've inspired me. I may
Struggle.
have to do another. We've done shows on my channel, like the weirdest stuff I used to believe, and people call in with
Oh, that's
awesome
great.
stuff. So you've
That's really
inspired me.
good.
We may have to cover this topic again. Maybe we'll do it whenever you're a guest. I don't
Please.
know. I'll pray
I've
on
thought
it.
of
I'll seek the
some
Lord.
other ones too that are even
Okay.
worse. There was a pastor, which I was brought into his church because my dad was speaking, and I was brought in by guys with guns, because that was just like normal, I guess, because Tennessee. And then the pastor invited me to his office, not sketchy at all, to tell me a story about the rings on his fingers because angels had given him each of the gemstones that were in his rings. Like,
Wow.
really
Wow.
amazing stuff.
Yeah, we'll
Anyways,
have to do a show.
welcome to Charismania.
Yeah.
We've got a couple calls left. Are you down?
Yeah, sure.
All right. I don't know if I'm going to say this name correctly. Olim? Please tell us how to say your name so that I don't butcher it. How are you?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How do we
Hi, guys.
say your name?
It's not a real name, so you can pronounce it however you like.
Oh, great. All right. Well, what did you want
Yes.
to talk about tonight?
So I recognize that you guys have access to like the screening topic or whatever. Is that correct?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. Yeah. So the question was about the goal of enlightenment with regards to spirituality and like that being the kind of end step of a spiritual practice. And I understand just kind of right up the bat that there's a lot of non-secular or a lot of like woo-woo language in there.
Yeah.
But I don't really intend for it to be like that. I mostly just would like to ask what y'all think about, because I've been listening to the show for a bit, and I've heard mostly just kind of thrashing like, you know, Abrahamic religion and stuff, and you guys just kind of decimating those kinds of arguments. But I haven't heard a ton regarding a lot of Eastern mysticism that's a lot less focused on like a God belief and more about like just internal whatever. Like I'm a little nervous, so I'm a
No,
little
it's okay.
lost for words. But
We can ask some
yeah,
questions to help get us to a more direct point too. I would just start with what is it exactly you believe? Do you believe in a God?
not really. I think the thing that I'm after is the like the idea of a instilling some kind of quote unquote spiritual practice, and you know the end goal of that, according to philosophies like Buddhism, would be, you know, some kind of awakening or something.
Hmm.
And I like there are aspects of that that of course are really kind of murky and unknown. But you know, I've been wanting to call in for a bit, and then I've been doing some kind of cursory research regarding just the effects of meditation, and you know, kind of there seems to be pretty substantial evidence for a really
Yeah.
positive benefit um, to practices like that.
Yeah, meditation doesn't go against like I have tons of atheist friends that meditate and would say even that they have spiritual practices. I don't think I to me, I think the word spiritual is just kind of like not very helpful. It's so vague, and I think people just use it to describe um a lot of different things. Some things that I am like, "Oh, well,
I
I
agree.
do that." And some things where I'm like, "Okay, well, now you're getting into the realm of supernatural, and I disagree. I don't think there's evidence for that." But I just think it's such a like vague thing, and it comes down to a lot is just like terminology, like what words they're using. But until we get into specifics, I can't like I don't really have much to offer you. Seth, do you have any questions or
You
anything?
know, my only thought is I think it is natural for people to seek out, for lack of a better word, the transcendent. Those moments of
Uh-huh.
ebullience and feeling like we are wired in and maximizing the moments, and we feel a sense of awe and wonder and joy, and I think this explains many attractions to various religions that pretend to provide that. The thing is that you don't have to lie to people to get that. You know, people who go to a Christian worship
Right.
service, they have communal music, right? So they lower the lights and they play the cymbals a certain way. And you can actually see the tempo change. We go big and then we're medium, and we have the ballad and moving music with strings. There's repetition and you're singing. Communal singing actually produces endorphins, which is not just a pleasure mechanism, but it's also a bonding agent. So now you're connected to the music, and you're also connected to your fellow human beings and music. You can get that same rush at a concert, right? You can
Yep.
get
For
that
sure.
same high from non religious exercises, and you can experience transcendence in that way. And using my clumsy language, with human beings celebrating life through ritual. And I have become hugely
Hmm.
convinced that ritual is a wonderful way to frame the human experience. I think ritual helps us. I think we gravitate to structure, and whether it's clothing or music or having a certain way of doing things, it's something to look forward to. It marks the moments. It's reassuring in so many ways. And these things can provide that spiritual, it can scratch that itch without having us sell out to these ideas or claims of gods and monsters. Okay.
Michelle. Yeah, and I really appreciate your use of language regarding ritual and transcendence. Those are really more of what I am kind of intending to communicate, and the word spiritual is not one that I, like hang on to.
No, Eve's right. Spiritual is a word that we use because language is clumsy when we're trying to describe those types of connective moments, But it's I don't begrudge anybody the use of it. Some people get pedantic and they're like spiritual and they get all snobby. I don't give a shit. I think language is fluid. If it describes what you're approaching and you're not invoking the gods and monsters, I'll go with that. I'm not going to deny anybody that. So don't beat yourself up over language. Language is clumsy in this regard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I'm sorry, go ahead, Eve.
I think that sometimes it's helpful when we label things that way, especially if it gives, somebody who maybe experienced a lot of religious trauma and now their way of like connecting is to, as an atheist or as a skeptic, even to still label something as spiritual to them. But then, for example, me, I was just in Finland and one night walk outside, look up, and the northern lights are the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And I can't even begin to explain how cool it was. I literally just laid there and watched them for an hour and was taking a million pictures and taking it all in. And just like beside myself, like I didn't know how to contain this sense of wonderment and awe. And what was so cool for me was to get to experience that. And at one point I had this thought, oh my God, I'm not having to now sit here and be like, thank you, God, for doing this. And that's so cool. And I wonder why God made Northern, I didn't have to leave the present moment. I got to just stay present and enjoy what I was seeing and not have to label it and not have to, see, is this confirming this belief that I have? It's just like, no, I just got to be a human. That was my thought the whole time. Oh, I love being a human. I got to be a human who could see these amazing things and enjoy it and get the goosebumps and take it all in and not have to make anything of it other than that moment. And sure, maybe that's spiritual. I don't know in somebody else's terms. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think a big thing that I have been really fascinated with and not really knowing how to pursue is like, having that sense of wonder or something, but then like wanting to actually follow up on those questions and say like, oh, what does this mean? What am I? All those kinds of things. And it seems like, meditation or other things. I mean, like I like to journal a lot, and other practices seem to be at least somewhat capable of like getting some headway in that type of thing. And then there's, the concept of enlightenment, which seems to be like, I guess, presented along with those same practices. And like, I don't know. I mean, I guess
to me, it sounds like you're really enjoying the idea of what some spiritual practices claim to offer or promise that they're making you, that if you just keep this up at some point, you're going to hit this, spiritual or this, some sort of climax in life where you're suddenly going to become a better person, or you're suddenly going to not feel suffering, or you're suddenly going to, there's going to be this thing. And I don't see evidence of that being a thing for anybody ever. I think life is being present and experiencing it as it's happening. And I haven't met a person who just like meditated and then they hit this point and now they're like a superhero. So I understand that it's cool to have these things that it promises. And at least spirituality or some of this woo-woo stuff offers you something here and now, whereas a lot of these religions say like, well, when you die, then you'll see that we were right, But we can look around and see that these, I don't know what to call them really, but these like spiritual promises, I'm still not seeing evidence of that happening, Does that make sense? I'm suffering from severe jet lag, so I'm hoping that my sentences are coming out in a way that you can understand.
that definitely makes sense. But I would also like to say that to a certain extent, I have kind of tasted like crumbs of, that kind of transcendent experience that does take a lot of, effort to get to. I've had, experiences with psychedelics and different just kind of states that have really felt like kind of, peeking into something that would possibly, and I don't have a lot of evidence for this, but things that seem to present the possibility of being, incredibly profound and life-changing should I pursue them. I'm considering going on a Vipassana meditation retreat, which is like 10 hours a day of meditation for 10 days straight. And the people running this thing, for the most part, as I understand it, are really just like teaching this practice without really, trying to point you into any particular conclusion. Like that's something you should just be reaching
Are
on
they
your
charging
own.
you? Are they taking money for this experience?
No, you actually you're actually not allowed to even donate until you've
Yeah, I was about to say
attended a
they wait
retreat.
until you do it, and then they tell you to give what you feel is an appropriate amount,
Well,
which is what I grew up doing in church too.
I think, spiritual's like trying to nail Jello to the wall, man. Yeah, it's just one of those undefinable words that everybody utilizes differently. If you take a
But the one thing
hallucinogenic
that
and you hallucinate and you have a profound experience, does brain chemistry not likely explain that? If you felt something that, if you felt you'd left your mind, how would you demonstrate that? I think we could go down this rabbit hole and probably stay there for the rest of the year. But at the end of the day, I simply would encourage you that I don't think mindfulness meditation is a bad thing. I think ritual and structure is a
Sure.
good thing. And I think trying to maximize the moments and feel those ebullient experiences and feelings and, connecting as human beings and to each other in the world we live in is something worth doing. And I hope you're able to do that while also remaining grounded in the real world. Okay.
for sure. And I
Yeah.
also just like feel like
Quickly.
okay. So there's so much to be like so much unknown and everything, and I am never going to, unless I get a PhD in fucking, something, I'm not really going to be able to make any serious discoveries of that. But I do feel like with concerted effort, there is discoveries that I can make about my own experience as a human. And that's the kind of thing that I'm, considering really taking a deep dive into with things like ritual and different practices that
Okay.
are hopefully going to be
Final
transcendent.
thought, and I'm only jumping in because Eve is admitted to being jet lagged, and I'm hoping I'm not walking all over you.
No, this is great.
You don't have to have a PhD to be a scientist in this world because we are doing science every day. We are testing and retesting where we have a hypothesis. We're going to see if it works. There is a burden of proof. We're always tapping on the glass in our lives to see what works and what doesn't. And there are a lot of people who have PhDs who have extremely bad ideas, who have been cast off by other experts in their fields because their findings are just untenable. Go see the Discovery Institute if you want. They're loaded with people who have doctorates, but they are simply discarded by the rest of the scientific community because they are not credible. And so you don't have to have letters after your name to do science. So keep kicking the tires, asking the questions, and let us know what you find, okay?
Yeah,
Right
and the
on.
only thing I would
Thank you.
add is just be careful of people that are promising you these things that are willing to accept money for it, and just be careful because I have seen too many of my friends go down a very similar route to where this spiritual experience and group and thing that you end up giving money for turns into very similar. It ends up looking like the evangelical cult I came out of. We'll put it that way. A lot of control happens, money gets taken, all of that. So just look out for yourself. I think it's great that you're exploring. I think it's great that you're looking to experience some self growth, but also be careful.
Thanks, Olam. Thanks
Sounds
for
good.
calling.
Thank you.
Did you ever have
All
that, like,
right.
Holy Spirit speaking in tongues? Did you ever feel that? And you're like, oh, it's the Lord. You ever have that?
You know what? My story is very similar to, I know you've talked with Alice Grutchen,
Yeah.
where I thought that I like had to feel this stuff. And so I was like, I guess this is it. I guess I'm doing it. I definitely spoke in tongues and I, did all the things. But I describe it like the story of the emperor's the emperor's clothes,
Yeah.
where he was like, look at my robes, aren't they amazing? And everyone's like, yeah, they're so great. And actually he had nothing on him. And this one little kid finally goes, but he's naked. He's not wearing any clothes. But everyone had been pretending because everyone thought, oh, something must be wrong with me that I can't see his clothes that he's wearing. And I think that's what it was. I thought like, well, I have to assume that I'm feeling God right now because otherwise that means something severely wrong with me.
I think for
but I
us, it
definitely,
was, oh, forgive me. I thought that was the end of the sentence. Eve,
no,
go ahead.
that
Please finish
almost,
your thought.
I definitely felt these things. And then I went to my first concert at 16, secular concert, and I felt those things, but stronger. And I was like, what does this mean? Which I told myself at the time, it means God is so big that he's even at a rock show. Like that's what I told myself. But anyways.
I would get to the point where if a natural human emotion happened, I would assign God to it. So if I was deeply moved by something that had happened, it was the Spirit, or if I had an intuition or my conscience was telling me something, or I just had an idea, an inspiration for something I was going to do next. I didn't give myself credit or say, wow, the brain, yeah, wow,
Right.
I woke up and had a great idea. I had been trained to say, boy, the Lord just planted this seed in my mind. And I just thank you, Jesus. Thank you for allowing me to have that
Planting of
inspiration.
seeds.
All inspiration comes from Jesus. All good things come from on high. And, it's funny, when I left the faith, I was like, I still get inspired and I still have those moments of deep feeling. And now I don't have to, like, I'm not chained to mythology. I get to
Right.
enjoy it for what it is and experience it for what it is. And I think that's much more fulfilling. It's hard for a lot of theists to realize that, to see that, man, I'm happier, more centered, and I'm more connected to the world and to my fellow human beings now than I ever was as a believer. I'm sure you
Yeah.
feel the same way.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Oh,
I got
for
all
sure.
preachy at the end there. I got all emotional. I was
Love
about to
it.
hold an altar call. So go ahead.
That's the theme of the night is you just being really emotional. So
It's true. It's true.
oh man. Well, we've got one last call before I am going to go pass out from my jet lag. For those who don't know why I'm so jet lagged, I've been 7 hours behind. No, 7 hours ahead for 3 months and now I'm trying to adjust. I've only been back for like 2 days. So I'm in La La Land right now in my head. But let's
Good.
talk to Alexa. Hi, Alexa. How are you doing?
Well, hi. Thank you for answering my call.
Of course. So you wanted to chat about the difference between atheist and agnostic, is that right?
Yes, correct. So my best friend, he's atheist, and like he turned me on to Seth Andrews and Matt and Aron Ra and the Holy Untrinity or whatever the hell. And
that's a good one.
No, I have to explain that. Hang on.
I
Alexa, you can't throw that out. For those who are curious, Matt, Aron, and I are friends, and we did a speaking tour a decade ago. We spoke in the States and we spoke in Australia, and we called it the Unholy Trinity. And that name stuck. That's why she said it. Alexa, thank you. Please continue.
Okay. So he considers himself atheist and I consider myself agnostic, and we get into debates a lot. And the reason I consider myself agnostic is mainly because of my grandmas, because they're still religious and they go to church, and I love my grandmas. So is it bad if I go to atheism? But it's like I love my grandmas and I don't want to insult them. So it's like what's the difference between like atheism and agnostic? agnostic, being
We're tracking.
agnostic.
First of all, I
Like,
think
I'm sorry. I'm
you're
sorry.
gonna get.
I'm nervous. I'm
You're
stuttering.
doing
Oh, you're
great,
good.
Alexa. You're
We
doing
totally
so
know what
good.
you're saying. You're gonna get a different answer. Like even Matt and I have disagreed about this on the show before because to me, I think that everybody is technically agnostic because I don't think anybody knows for sure. I think that the God claim is unfalsifiable, but then I'm agnostic atheist because I also don't believe it. So to me, atheism is a lack of belief. So I'm agnostic atheist. I don't know because I don't think you can know an unfalsifiable claim, but I also don't believe it at all. Now, when it comes to certain gods, I'm gonna end up more on the like Gnostic atheist, where I'm like, no, that God, we can rule that God out. So I don't know if that makes sense. But as far as the comment about your not wanting to offend family members and stuff, the thing is, you either believe or you don't believe. Now, whether you tell them that or not is you get to decide that, and you don't have to tell them, and I think that's totally fine. But it's not like you choose to be an atheist or you choose to be agnostic or you choose to be a theist. We believe things or we don't believe them. So that's my short thoughts on it. Seth, what about you?
Well, it's so well stated. The only thing I would add is, Alexa, it sounds like you're putting a lot of pressure to label yourself. And I don't think you should. I don't think you should worry about, you want to call yourself an atheist? Are you more comfortable with agnostic? I don't know. I'm not religious. I'm on a journey. I'm still figuring it out. I'm nothing. I don't care. And I wouldn't. It can be one of those moments for navel gazing when we sit back and get all philosophical about. And I've heard the atheist community. I've seen splintering in the atheist movement over atheist versus agnostic. People have been fighting for
That's so
years
funny.
on this subject. I'm like, what is wrong with people, right? We can have that discussion, but have it in good faith. Just
Right.
realize we're all on the same team. We're all human brothers and sisters, and people get so charged up. I've come to the point, Alexa, when I just don't care. Like I'm an atheist, but if somebody likes agnostic, okay, great. If somebody isn't comfortable with the label, fine. And when you and your partner are getting into a discussion, I think it's conversation fodder over coffee, but I wouldn't let it become anything that would become contentious, raised voices. Well, what if you're not that, or what do you think? No one gets to tell you who you are, what you think, and how to label yourself. Just go with what you're comfortable with, and we can have the conversation about the usefulness of labels because they do have uses. But I wouldn't trip on it. All right. The most important thing is that you are trying to live honestly. You're on your journey, and you're trying to do the compassionate things to keep strife away from those in your family who might lose their minds and complicate your life. That's a whole other call. But am I making any sense, Alexa, about labels and how we can get hung up on them?
And that's the thing. It's like, and like the people that hand out like pamphlets and stuff on the streets, it's like, I just tell them like, no, thank you. Like, and my best friend, like he tells them like, fuck off. And I don't think that's right because it's like, well, they're just people. We're people.
Well,
And I just think you should be nice to humans because, well, I'm a human, you're a human, they're a human.
what I hear then is another label, anti-theist, right? So he's going hard at religion and religious people, and that's a whole other conversation. But again, let's make the journey about you. Right? You can't control someone else. I think you can suggest and say, do you find this helpful? These are human beings. We should approach them with empathy and compassion, try to meet them more where they are so that conversations can begin. I'm tracking. I'm on team Alexa. You know what I'm saying? I would be saying the same things that you have been saying. But if you're ever challenged about how you label yourself, honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just focus on, hey, let's go try to find out what's true. If we don't know, let's say we don't know. And if you find out better information tomorrow, have your people call my people. Okay?
No, and that's exactly how I feel. It's just like I just want everybody to be happy, and like I don't want to, like I don't believe in religion, like I don't follow religion, but I also don't want to offend anybody, and that's why I say I'm agnostic. So that's why I was calling to say like, what's the difference between agnostic and atheist?
All right, hang on. Alexa, I'm sorry, Eve. I'm sorry. I know we're going to call it, but I can't let this
No,
go.
please.
I can't
Please.
let this go. Alexa, because I'm so temperamental, you've triggered me, and now I'm filled with rage, apparently. I guess this is what rage sounds like. Some caller before you said I was ragey. No, in all seriousness, don't spend your life. You are not on this earth to keep everybody else comfortable. Now, if you have a family member and you're doing a cost benefit discussion on how much you want to distress someone else, especially an elderly parent who might be, close to the end of their life, and you're like, is it worth it? Or, are there other factors I have to worry about? I get that. But I don't want to offend people is not a way to live overall, because you are holding yourself to a standard that they are not holding themselves to, because they get to be themselves 100% loud and proud without apology. And you're the one that's supposed to sit on your hands and stay mute and not stir the waters. That's not peace. That is simply an absence of conflict. And it denies you the gift of an authentic life. Don't walk around and think, well, I don't want to say this because someone will be offended. I don't want to be my true self because someone will be offended. That's not a reason not to be your true self. If they become offended and they freak out or they judge you or leave or do whatever they're going to do, honestly, that then your authentic life is a black light on a problem that goes much deeper than your opinions about God's. Theirs was conditional love. There's judgment, there's shaming, there's other stuff going on right there. You owe yourself an authentic life. So you're not here to keep others comfortable. That's what I'm going to leave you with. Okay?
Yeah, and
Thank you. I want to think that I just left my family. I moved from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Portland, Oregon, and that's the reason why, because I didn't feel comfortable there because of family. So thank you. That's a lot to think about.
yeah, just remember, if you aren't able to be yourself around them, like Seth was saying, when they're being themselves, then you're not actually even having a real relationship with them because they don't actually know you. If you can't show them who you are and you can't voice your beliefs and you're having to shape what you even call yourself just to keep them happy, then that's not real relationship. And I understand that for safety's sake, some people can't afford to, for finances or even physical safety, they can't afford to be fully authentic. But that's amazing that it sounds like you've made this move and that's setting a boundary in its own way. But you're not preserving anything by not showing up fully. You're actually like avoiding an opportunity to maybe even have better connection with them because you don't know how they'll react and maybe some interesting conversations will come from it. Because saying I'm agnostic or I'm atheist or something that could offend them is not the same as going up to them and saying what you are is horrible and you shouldn't be that and I hate it. That's offensive. That's understandable. But you being who you are, if somebody can't accept that, then you already aren't having authentic relationship with them anyways. So I wish you all the best, and I hope those conversations go well, and I hope you find yourself in a place where you do get to show up and really be yourself and not feel pressured to label yourself or to conform to what somebody else needs you to be, but just to be able to be yourself.
This conversation has helped a lot. Like you guys are really nice people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexa.
Thanks, Alexa. Have a
Eve,
great evening.
You are better at this jet lagged than some people are on 8 hours of sleep and 3 cups of coffee.
That's
You're really
very
good.
kind of you to say.
Very
I can
good.
feel I'm sorry for the callers we didn't get to. Anybody, especially theists, please call back on Tuesday night. I will be less jet lagged. Alyssa and I would love to chat with you guys. But Seth, it's been so awesome hanging out with you. I'm so glad we finally got to do a whole show together.
Yeah, it's a real honor. I appreciate the intelligence behind your comments and the compassion and the empathy. And I don't know about you, but I'm at a point now where all of the screaming, the online constant conflict, everybody's throwing stuff at each other in these conversations, and to have a de-escalator and someone who's able to see the humanity in our callers and hit them at that level is refreshing, and that makes it so much fun for me to be a part of it. So thanks to you, and thanks to the line for letting me play along. It's been a lot of fun for me.
That means so much. Well, we're going to roll our credits now. And also really want to thank Stephanie again and Arden for producing. You're amazing. Please check out our, yes, thank you, Arden, the voice of God that came through a couple times when we needed her. And please check out our Patreon, patreon.com/calltheline. You'll see our producers scrolling there. But our Patreon needs more subscribers. I don't know what number we're at. But isn't Jimmy going to do something if we hit a certain number? I don't know. Exciting things will happen if you guys go join the